Here we go again. Okay, welcome to Advisory Design Panel this March 18th, 2021. We start the meeting by acknowledging that it's being held on the Squamish Nation traditional territory. At the beginning, I'd like to do a roll call just to make sure I've got everyone who's here. So I'm not seeing Brent. No Brent. Kareem, present. Julian, present. Catherine, present. Farzan?
No Farzan.
No Farzan. We have Carlos, Amy Liebenberg. There we go. Hi, Amy. Long time no see.
Hiya.
Sarah. Sarah's here.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Long time no see. Missed you last week.
Yeah, I was having surgery, so that sort of trumped attending the meeting.
Well, I hope you're feeling better now.
Yep.
David is next. He's here.
Yeah.
Christina Sellen. Hi, Christina. I see you. And anyone that I've missed? Nope, I think I have a complete list here. It's been changing over the week, so we're good there. Okay. Then next I go on to read the procedures. So for electronic meetings, which is committee members attending the meeting electronically are required to advise the chair of the meeting of the following circumstances. A, when the committee member disconnects and or reconnects so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. B, committee members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair they wish to be placed on a speaker's list. C, with respect to a vote, committee members are required to say nay vote. No statement is required if the member is in favor. D, committee members shall put the telephone or computer on mute unless they wish to speak. E, committee members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. F, committee members shall text the CAO or the or a contact for the meeting. And I think we will chat out a phone number on there in case anyone gets cut off. And then G, the meeting shall be recessed for up to 10 minutes if a technical difficulty occurs on the district side, which results in the committee member being unable to connect to the meeting. Next, we go on to adoption of agenda. Can I have somebody move for that? Kareem, seconded by Sarah. Anyone against? No one against. And the minutes from February 18th, any discussion on those? Questions? No? Okay, so to adopt those, we'll have somebody move. David? Anyone second? Carlos? Anyone against? No one is against, so those are adopted. So our first item of business, moving on here, is DP 555 Lot A University Heights, and we'll hand over to Brian Daly, our planner.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Advisory Design Panel. Today we are presenting DP 555 for Lot A at University Heights. It is an application, a development permit application for 10 townhomes, and is located on an unaddressed parcel off of University Boulevard, just east of the bridge over the Masheter Creek. It's an 8,110 square meter site, and it is zoned University Housing 1. Each unit is roughly 160 square meters or 1,700 square feet in size and comprises 3 bedrooms. The subject property is a vacant lot located in the University Heights subdivision, which was subdivided in 2019. Currently, there is a trail connecting to the adjacent neighborhood park from University Boulevard running through the property. There is also a statutory right-of-way for water and sanitary lines that run through the center of the parcel. The project is requesting 2 variances, a reduction in the front yard setback from 7.62 meters to 3 meters to allow for a shared waste room, and a reduction of the interior side setback from 7.62 meters to 3.87 meters for a few of the units. The interior side setback variance is requested to keep the units away from the steep slope and the statutory right-of-way, and allow for some shed structures to be located off the rear of the buildings. The development, again, is accessed off University Boulevard. Vehicle parking for the development meets the zoning bylaw requirements. Each unit has a separate garage providing the required 2 parking spaces. And otherwise, the development meets the zoning requirements of the UH1 zone. So with that, I will pass it on to Chris Hunter, the architect for the application. And Chris, if you just want to let me know when you want me to skip to the next slide, that would be great.
Sure, yeah. Is there any way to share a screen or no for me to do it?
I believe the person who is coordinating this was unable to promote you to presenter, so I think I'll have to do it. But I'll just mute myself and just let me know when you want to go to the next one.
Okay, no worries.
Can I interrupt for a very brief minute here?
Yeah.
I'll have to just apologize because Julian had mentioned to me at the outset here that he is a part of this project and should be recused from participating in this first project here.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm changing my hat.
Yeah. We'll note that. And we can carry on. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks for your time. I know it's a bit challenging with the media and being remote, so if anybody can't hear me throughout the presentation, please speak up. My name is Chris Hunter. I'm the architect on record for this project. I think Brian did a great job giving the brief. You can go to the next slide, Brian. I'll give you a bit of context. Can you hear me okay, Brian?
Yes, I
Perfect.
skipped the slide. Did it not show up on your screen?
It is. It might be a bit of the classic rainbow spinning wheel. So yeah, just a bit of context on where the site is and connections and proximity to other neighborhoods. The top kind of panorama shows Highway 99 there on the left and the Burgundy line. The most typical route of getting up to Quest University, up Mamquam Road and the Boulevard. The site in pink there on the right. So you kind of go from highway through a bit of retail and commercial, through the single family neighborhoods up to Quest University, which is a mix currently of multifamily and single family. On the left-hand image, you see how Mashador Creek plays into this site. So the overpass bridge on the boulevard, hopefully you're familiar with, and Mashador running underneath. The existing single family phase 1 houses in that kind of circular portion of the image, and then again the site delineated in pink there, and you see the existing playground park just to the south of the site. And then the right hand image overlays in the roof plan, so you see the 10 repetitive roof forms going long ways across the site, basically paralleling the existing bench and flat topography of the site where that existing pathway is. The gray being the strata road we're proposing, which will include and encourage a pedestrian link, much like a shared laneway would be between vehicles and pedestrians. To the left there in that hatch is quite a steep slope down to Mashador. It's a bit of definitely disturbed soils, alder and kind of new growth forest. On the right side, you see behind the townhomes that green overlay, which I'll go into a little more detail in the next slides. But it's a key part to the strategy. We're really wedged in between the steep slope on the downslope side and then some very large existing retaining walls on the upslope right-hand side. So next slide, please, Brian. Waiting for it.
Sorry, is it still, I skipped the slide like, it seems like a minute ago now, and it doesn't seem to have shown up on your guys' screen.
Yeah, it still shows the previous. Maybe I'll talk to it, and then when it pops up, you guys can probably rip through it. There you go. So the top image is from the boulevard just after you cross over the bridge, which goes over Mashador. You can kind of see that garbage can there and the gravel pathway. That's the existing pathway. The next image shows that pathway running basically south, connecting through that flat area to the park. So underneath that currently is a sewer and water right of way. So that's a, given something we couldn't move and has very specific requirements for soil coverage and setbacks for future maintenance and connections. The third image down shows the west view. So it's got really nice sun exposure when those deciduous trees lose their leaves. You get nice views of the Tantalus Range. Lots of light swinging around from the south, kind of towards the Chief, and then wrapping this view to the west. The bottom image is standing in the park looking back to the north, so back down that gravel park or pathway towards the first image. You can see the large single-family homes up on that second berm, which is, that one is about 20-25 feet up in that UH1 development. So essentially, we're slotting the townhomes in on the existing flat bench and utilizing that existing berm as the backyard space. And if you go to the next slide, Brian. Perfect. We'll just run through kind of three quick site plans, one showing ground floor, which is this. So it shows on the right access off of the boulevard into the Strata Road, guest parking and bicycle for guests at the top there. You can see how close the contours are on that top of the page. Is basically sloping down really steep to Masheter. So we were really restrained there. And then on the other side of the townhomes, you'll see that the other tight contour band, which is the first berm up to another flat bench, and then right on the property line, and in quite a few cases encroaching into this property, is those large rock stack and block retaining walls of the single family homes. But each unit has a generous 2-car garage with extra room for extra depth for storage, bikes, skis, everything why we live here. You see on the north end, the right-hand side, is the garbage utility room, which we'll talk about relative to a variance. So that's where our hydro, our gas, sprinklers all come into the building. And equally, that was a request. Originally, we had the garbage totes in each individual units, but both the district and the garbage collection company requested it be as close as possible to the boulevard. So that's why it ended up there. Each entrance is kind of articulated with a little more inset to give a little more protection and privacy, and then a landscape planter. So each entrance has a unique articulated covered porch from weather protection. Next slide, please, Brian. So this is up to the second floor, which is the living level. And the big effort here is basically filling that backyard space, bearing the ground level parking with fill. So you can walk out from your living level to a backyard space, which Julian will describe in the kind of landscape strategy. So that does twofold. One, a much more livable space that, in a 3-bedroom home, these are intended to be family homes or people, multiple people living there. So the access to grade and green space was really important. And obviously there's a big effort to do this. It also reduces the kind of scale of the existing retaining walls and berms. And it also gives us a chance to rehabilitate with some tree planting and landscape at the back there, what is pretty derelict right now with weeds and alders and such. You'll see we kind of have this strategy of this garden shed idea, which I'll talk again in the next slide about the variances, but we have every second unit, we've got a split garden shed. So that's a place for people to put, their garden tools, their kids' toys, their outdoor furniture. And it's just a really practical, I think, way to manage that type of overflow from multifamily projects. Trying to play off the existing bylaw for the number of allowable auxiliary buildings, and equally the typical setback allowance for these types of structures in this zoning. And then between every second unit, you've got your own private patio with a bit of overhang protection and a single tree and kind of planted area. So each neighbor has some adjacency, ability to socialize, but at the same time, you're not looking down 10 rows of Home Depot fencing with a partition and kind of seeing everyone's stuff and exposure. So there's these nice little courtyards. And then the back green shaded area is meant to be a very open play field, meadow space for everyone to share and people to kick a ball around and such. Next slide, please, Brian. So this is the roof plan and just shows a few of those ideas I already touched on. So I'll kind of go over it quickly. But on the right side, maintaining pedestrian access across the boulevard, but realigning the crosswalk. So currently the crosswalk is aligned with the drive aisle. So separating those two just for pedestrian safety, demarcating that pedestrian pathway through the Strata Road with some playful painting and kind of design, which Julian will talk about further, but really acknowledging that the community has been using this kind of informal pathway for, I don't know, a better part of a decade probably, and rather than trying to discourage that is try to do it in a safe manner. So a lit drive aisle, we provided some extra width of that drive aisle, and then a bit of playful design with it as well. The steep slope, again, we see to the north, so that red highlighted contour really shows that that's about as far as we could push the retaining wall to the west to make it feasible. It's a really disturbed soils, very difficult to pour a footing there and then do a lock block retaining wall that can retain the road and the development, while at the same time giving the existing utility right of ways enough clearance for future excavation if they ever need to be replaced or maintained. On the right, you see that highlighted front yard setback variance. It really is the only logical place with a bunch of feedback. We did explore 3 or 4 locations for that, but that was deemed the best place from a screening perspective. The kind of white portion closer between that and the boulevard is really heavily treed right now with existing evergreens and some height and topography. So I think you really won't see that too much from the boulevard or from the development. And then I think the key thing to focus on the left-hand side of the slide is the side yard variance. So these garden sheds you see highlighted in red on the left there. And then just below that, you'll see the 1.52 meter accessory building setback dotted red lines. So if those garden sheds were detached, and there's no minimum for how much those were detached from the main building, it could be an inch, they would be compliant, they wouldn't be encroaching. But for practicality standpoints, for construction and also heating these little sheds so they're not, dank and mildewy, I think it makes a lot of sense from an architectural perspective and a maintenance perspective to keep them attached. So then the way I rationalize the encroachment is it's really that wedge highlighted in red of 1.2 meter encroachment. And that's just a nature of all these constraints of the tightness of the environmental riparian setback, which is that green polygon, really just getting to the edge of our strata road, which has to be a certain width for fire access, vehicle access, and these right-of-ways. And then the steep slopes off our property to the east. So in my head, that's a small variance request that I think does a good job of managing all these other constraints on the site. Next slide, please, Brian. So now kind of getting to the form and character, the majority of what we will be talking about here today, just start with the material palette. I think what I've learned over the years is like priority in Squamish is durability, low maintenance, timelessness, just trying to design a building with materials that will last and not be a burden on the strata while still being contemporary and contextual. So black standing seam, metal roofing, as well as siding, cement lap siding, both of those being the dominant cladding elements on the building and provide shadow between each panel of both materials. And then the lower color palette, adding in a matte finish gray as kind of a soft base to the whole development, a mix between concrete and cement panel, painted over the garage doors. And then on the rear elevations, we'll see that as well. Just again, trying to be subdued and simple, a good backdrop for multifamily life. Looks great against landscape and planting. And then I think the real architectural kind of gem that our clients and myself were excited to introduce was a solar shade on the 3rd level in a really nice soft taupe or puce. It's a raw green beige color, but in reality, it's more of like a soft beige yellow, and we'll see that in the elevations. Next slide, please, Brian. So this is the front elevations, I would call it, facing the Strata Road. At the bottom of the page there, you see the full length of all of the units. The predominant and intentional kind of sawtooth roof line is a bit of a play on the kind of mountain landscape we're used to, as well as a bit of branding play from Holborn and general development in the area. A lot of effort placed in the depth of that black frame overhang and the inset balconies. And then you see that continuous band of the solar shade on the 3rd level, providing privacy to the bedrooms and solar protection from the west sun. This is all due west facing, so it really does get, has some impact for solar overheating. And then the base kind of plinth, I would call it, in that kind of soft gray with each entranceway being recessed a bit further and having a planter. And then on the top right, so that would be the entry, the north unit you would see coming off the boulevard. So trying to give it a different sort of solution to articulate that north facade, packaging a double height cut through to the balcony, and then packaging the 2 windows with a cladding that matches the white with lap siding and cement panel. Next slide, please, Brian. So then this is the rear elevations. Again, similar strategy of a soft gray kind of base. That's the back of the kitchens with a window into the kitchen and a patio door into the kitchen. So that's where people's kind of private space would be. Some overhang protection for barbecue and storage. You see the little shed separating every 2nd unit. And then that upper frame idea, trying to reinforce that really strong roof line, making some good efforts that little flat catch roof is basically an oversized gutter with our downspouts are nicely packaged black on black so they don't become an afterthought. Our HVAC, dryer, exhaust fan type vents packaged as well in that window band on the 3rd floor. Those are the bedrooms and bathrooms up there. And then in the top right, that would be the furthest south unit. So similar to the north, trying to articulate it in an interesting way, but not make it overly busy. So instead of a vertical packaging of windows like on the north, we went for a more horizontal packaging of the white window with the white horizontal lap siding in between. And those are really nice south views to the park and kind of out towards the Chief. Next slide, please, Brian. This is a bit of a schematic section showing the challenges with the site and also kind of that effort of filling the backyard. So the top section is the Strata Road downslope on your left, cut through the middle of the block, basically, Unit 4, and it shows the fill in the backyard. So that living level, experientially for the tenants, would be walking out to grade and just how that kind of transitions to the really high retaining walls and single family at the back. So I think it does a lot for the occupants. It does a lot for townhouse typologies to make them ground oriented instead of 2nd floor balcony type buildings. And then again, Unit 10, which is where that variance is, just shows how tight we're kind of playing with a few things. The environmental and Strata Road requirements, existing retaining walls, although at this end it's about half the height as the ones of the north side. And then District of Squamish bylaw requirements for how high rock stack retaining walls can be before we step them back and then go up again. But again, I think that's a nice opportunity for some plantings in those terraces and still maintain access for all the units to that shared open space at the rear of the units. Next slide, please, Brian. Just blitzing through these really quickly. Top left would be the view coming into the Strata unit. These aren't so much materially representative, but massing wise, I think we start to see the roof line and how that plays, and then the continuity of that solar shade in kind of a playful soft yellow, and how that really brings a nice streetscape and a very, I think, modern aesthetic to that street. The next right one would be the back, showing that upper third story frame sawtooth roof, and the lower level being this kind of pattern of nice courtyards, covered space, and then out to the park, shared lawn space. The middle left is from the south end of the Strata Road, looking back down towards the Boulevard street entrance. Again, I think just the frames and the effort and the variety of overhangs, I think will likely be step 4 for building code energy requirements for this building. So we had to really find a balance between a clean envelope as a way to get high performance construction, and then also provide weather protection and articulation and layer all those things in. So that strategy of that really crisp black frame against the white inset, and then the yellow sunscreen, which hopefully you can see, I think does that really well. The bottom images maybe just reiterating what that sunscreen and the overhang, how we get quite a bit of shadow and play throughout the day, knowing the sun is swinging around, really exposing these buildings all day. I think within the depth and the materiality, we're going to get a really nice play of shadows and depth. Next slide, please, Brian. These are just some kind of Photoshop images to show what that potential pedestrian demarcation could be. So coming into the Strata Road, likely a raised rumble strip, like an oversized speed bump, more or less. So people slow down, some painting demarcation, again, to just get you aware you're going into a shared space. There's only 10 units, so this isn't a heavily trafficked in and out. It's a dead end Strata Road. So I think it will be quite a nice laneway type aesthetic for people to walk, connect to the park, or meet their friends. Next slide, please. Similar view, but from the boulevard. So it shows, it's a long development, infill development, basically in this flat bench that's existing. And then the effort is filling that backyard to screen the existing 40-foot high, in some cases lock block, with new trees being planted and some landscape, making a really usable yet private park space for these 10 units to utilize with their friends and family. Next slide. And lastly, just another kind of Photoshop sketch to show what that backyard space could be. So you kind of see the repetition of the garden shed, and then a tree and little courtyard for every 2 units. So there's almost like these little micro, shared gardens and courtyards between 2 units. And then you walk out, to walk your dog or run your kids out in the shared space. So that's it for me in trying to keep time efficient. And I'll hand it over to Julian, I guess, to go over the landscape, and then we can revisit questions. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Chris. Brian, do you actually have my drawings there, or should I share my screen?
I don't have them up handy, so if you don't mind sharing your screen, unless you can't, I can pull them up in the meantime.
Okay, I just got to figure out how to share my screen. Anybody have any ideas about?
Tori, could you make Julian the presenter, please?
That might help.
I think, Julian, you already have the little globe next to your name. So I think if you just click the share at the bottom of, if you go to the bottom of the screen, you should have a share icon. For me,
it's not, it's just grayed out. It's not,
I'm not sure. Usually when you have the little globe next to your name, you have that ability. But...
Chris, I mean, just to kind of reiterate some of Chris's points there. So you've got I guess you've got the drawings in your package. So from a landscape perspective, one of the things we really conscious of in that very tight site is providing some sense of communal amenity. And I think, the most sensible way to do that in this type of space is really a big green open space, a big green lawn area. And thankfully, the grade changing and the topography kind of lends itself to that already. So we're really buffering that with additional tree planting around the edges. So we've actually got 33 good sized 7 centimeter caliper quaking aspens, which will be quite a dramatic backdrop, I think, to the lawn space. And then the rest of the planting palette is, Chris has touched on most of the kind of design elements really, but I'll just briefly talk about the planting palette. So we tried to really kind of go for native wherever possible, native adaptive where not. It's all super low maintenance, of course, does all the right things. And then each of the little planter boxes by the front door, we had a little play with that, and each one's kind of a little vignette of native species, which is, we think it's kind of appropriate for the neighborhood. The shared road along the front, so Chris mentioned the graphic there. It's really just a way of alerting drivers that they're entering into a realm in which vehicles and pedestrians are going to be sharing the surface. And Chris mentioned the what we call the traffic table there, which is the kind of the enlarged speed bump at the entrance. So that's really a device that just tells someone driving in from the roadway that as you go over that big speed bump effectively, slow down, there might be kids running around, etc. But we were very conscious we didn't want to put in, you know, a curb and a walkway, because I think that would defeat the object of having that as a shared surface and a shared communal amenity where people could be riding bikes back and forth, etc. And as Chris said, it's not going to be a very busy road because it's essentially a dead end street. So I think I'll leave it there and open it up for questions from a landscape perspective. But it's a pretty contemporary way of dealing with the landscape, I think. We've tried to match that, of course, with the architecture and the architectural composition. So it's very unfussy. The plant palette's purposely restricted. It's quite minimal. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, Julian. We will move on to questions, and I'm wondering if I can start with David.
Hey, I knew you were going to start with me. Okay. Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Julian. Yeah, I read in the bylaw that there's you have to achieve step 5 for any variances. Can anyone speak to that, maybe from the district or the applicant? Is that a requirement here, or is step 4 still in play?
If this is a Part 9 building, they will have, I mean, typically when you are seeking a height variance or variances in general, we ask that the buildings go to 1 step higher. So this is a Part 3 building. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Part 3 buildings are at step 4 or step 3. So they can still achieve 1 step higher. It's the Part 3 buildings that are already maxed out. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jonas.
Sorry, Brian. It is step 4 now, so that is the highest step for a Part 3 building. There is no standard to go higher at the moment.
Okay. I thought it was a step. I thought it was a Part 9 because I saw a firewall to break it up, but in any case, doesn't matter. Maybe just a quick question for Julian. I love the paint on the driveway. How robust is that? I mean, will that wear well?
Yeah. So we've done a few projects where we've specified the road marking paint. It's essentially the same stuff that's used for marking yellow lines down the middle of the road. It's got a sort of it's very durable. It's got a slight glass bead in it, so it's slightly reflective. And you know, it's the same as the crosswalk downtown in Squamish. It's the same material, so it's pretty. You know, it stands up to F350s and
okay,
that type of stuff.
Perfect. Like you say, it's not going to be too high traffic. So
yeah.
I noticed there's a steep slope to the west. And you've got some planting. Is there going to be a need for fencing on that drop off there?
The planting is intentionally defensive planting, so it's not stuff that you could easily walk through. It's relatively prickly, So
Mhm.
it's the whole idea is that it's kind of it's keeping people away from that edge. So that's essentially, and it's going in at a decent size. So that's essentially how we're dealing with that kind of edge. We were trying to avoid as much as possible kind of fences and guards, and trying to keep the open aspect of it as much as possible. So we were hoping to do it in the actual plant species themselves. It's not something we've used this plant before in actual traffic medians, and there's not a chance that you would ever walk through it unless you want lacerated ankles.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. For Chris, you mentioned that the entrances are unique. Are they unique from each other, or are they just unique to the building because they look kind of they look similar in the renderings?
Yeah, they are all similar, so repetitive kind of intentionally. More trying to avoid the side-by-side entrance with a screen or something separating them. So if you look on the ground floor plan, they inset further than the garage, so you have a little bit of privacy for each unit. But no, color-wise, addressing, they're intentionally all consistent.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts about overlooking issues into that back bedroom from the upper single-family homes?
Yeah, we did. I think the nature of the bedrooms and how you would screen those would be challenging, like given where we're placing our effort on the 2 bedrooms, master bedroom, and the other more typical smaller bedroom face west. If you look on the 3rd floor plan, that back room is almost like a double bedroom. So I think really trying to be flexible. I mean, COVID's reiterated it, but that could be an exercise room, a great office, guest room, could be a lot of things. So a little less effort other than people with blinds placed architecturally on overlook concerns back there.
Yeah. Okay. I like yeah. That's a comment, not a question. Hang on. Then you mentioned the sheds between every second unit, which look great. There's a plant that separates units. Is there any additional fencing or screening there? I mean, how are you dealing with privacy if people are having a big party back there and their neighbors are in the adjacent space?
Yeah, maybe both of us.
It's
a
big Colorado blue spruce. So it's a fairly hefty tree. It's going in there between the two, and they're evergreen. So you'll get again. We kind of wanted to avoid the whole fencing kind of idea and try and do it more with the landscape. But I think it's still nice to have neighborly connection, but you don't necessarily want to feel like you're sitting in somebody else's backyard. But I think the nature and the size of the blue spruce back there will give that sense of connection, but also kind of that sense of privacy. So it's kind of a fine balance between the two.
Okay. My last question, I think it's fairly obvious to me on the plan, but was there any consideration for kind of dealing with some visitor parking closer to the end? I mean, I can see on the side it's fairly steep, but I'm just imagining visiting my friend at the end unit. I'm going to have to walk 90 meters across driveways to get to their house. Any pullouts or anything else that can be done?
Yeah, there was quite a few iterations for visitor parking, garbage, fire. All those discussions came in really early. That riparian setback, environmental, like Polygon, we can't do anything in there. So it really squashed. We originally wanted to propose like park maintenance vehicle parking at the end there as well. But it opens up a whole new development permit requirement, and equally a little maybe unwanted dead end turnaround, 3-point turn for visitors if they don't quite know where they're going. So I think keeping it out front where there is room to back into that garbage collection hammerhead, as well as the slope and the cost of the retaining to do it anything downslope, squashed that idea pretty quick.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's my questions. Cheers.
Thanks, David. Christine, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Thanks for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions. One, I'm just wondering about the density, why there needs to be 10 units across that area. It just feels to me like, I'm just curious if you explored having maybe less units and maybe a bit larger, or trying to fit it in a little bit differently instead of having it so restricted in terms of the slopes on both sides?
Thanks for your question. Yeah, we definitely did. Actually, originally when I got brought onto the project, we had 2 rows of townhomes. So one roughly 20, one downslope and one upslope.
Mhm.
And through a process of various constraints, mostly to do with civil, the right-of-way is in place, the really steep slopes, the cost of trying to retain downslope units, as well as the upslope ones, drove us to a less intensive. So this is actually almost half the units we started with, and still significant cost upgrades for the client on the boulevard connection, the retaining wall, some sewer rerouting we have from the single family units upslope, those big houses, actually has a connection down through this to that main chunk line. And then the effort to fill the backyard. So a whole bunch of layers of things, you know, money in, money out a little bit. But I also thought it was an appropriate use of the site, using a flat bench, not trying to get too much out of it, like the downslope units I think were. That would be a significantly different development of the green space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just feels like there's a very different condition between the first unit and the last unit.
Yeah, it's like the shape of the riparian setback and just the shape of the parcel. We're really not orthogonal, right? And we're trying to stay orthogonal to the topography and those right of ways. We did look at like staggering and bending, offsetting the kind of blocks a bit, but that brought with it different challenges. Yeah, so we feel this kind of consistency. I always prefer a calmer solution and a nice street front.
Okay. And then the other question was, I'm assuming there's some way for fire vehicles to come in and turn around. Would that be, you know, a drive in and a back out situation in this case for circulation?
Correct. It wouldn't be a turnaround. The idea, we did work with fire department early on. It is a Part 9 building, so the turnaround isn't a requirement, although we did explore trying to make that viable. The reality is the turnaround requirements for a fire truck is next to impossible on this site. So there will be a new hydrant on site, and then we are within kind of the required lengths from the hydrant to each door. So we did work with them, and this was deemed to be the best solution for what we could work with, and still be compliant, obviously, for life safety and building code.
Okay. Another question, I'm just wondering about the retaining walls. I see on your downside, it's listed as rock wall. And is that just a dry stack wall that you're proposing?
It'll actually most likely be a lock block wall.
Okay.
And it ranges in the middle, it's about 3 meters, and on either end, it's about 1 meter. So, you know, 1 to 4 lock blocks. It's undulating, kind of really challenging topography there, but no, currently it's planned as lock block retaining walls for structural geotechnical reasons.
And would that be the same on the upside?
No, the upslope, like backyard, I would call it, is rock stack to try to blend in a bit with what's existing. Most of the, other than on the north end, is a really about 40 to 50 foot high lock block of that one single family house, but the rest are existing rock stacks. So we're trying to kind of blend in with that and plant around them.
So that's where I'm looking at the lonicera, that the intent there is that it drapes over the wall, or it's covering the wall, softens the wall somewhat?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it for me for questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Christina. Sarah, you're up.
There, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Can you, Julian, talk about the pathway that's going to the backyard? It just says it's a gravel pathway. Is it proposed to be hard packed, or, and
Sorry, the pathway to the backyard. Oh, the one that's going through the existing trees.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so that's actually outside. Outside of our site area. but the intention would be that it'd be like a sort of crush compacted basalt, like a 3/4 minus, like you would see on the dike in Squamish or somewhere like that. It's the same kind of crush compacted gravel material.
Okay. And then this is a question for Chris. Can you tell me what the height is of the garage level?
I can. 1 second. I believe it's 9 feet. In half the units, I think it goes to 8.6. Yeah, I think it's 8'6" on the north or the south 5 units and 9 feet on the north 5 units.
Okay. And then what's the width of the staircase?
Oh, some dimensional questions here. 1
Sorry.
second. That's okay. Bear with me. Currently, it's 3 feet.
Great. Okay, cool. Those are all my questions. Thanks very much. I have no more.
You're muted, John.
I'm pressing it and it's not changing. Maybe Amy's having the same problem. It's funny to ask someone that they shouldn't be on mute when I'm actually on mute myself. There we go. No, Amy. Okay, so we'll move on. Well, Amy can maybe come back with us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Oh, hi. Sorry, guys. I just had endless issues with my sound today. My questions have actually been answered. Thank you. I love the landscaping elements here.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Amy. Carlos, you're up next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Ah, wonderful. That's great. Okay. The key was to disconnect my 3 monitor nerd setup. Okay. So thank you for that, Chris and Julian. I'll try to make this one quick. Have you looked into kind of moisture structural concerns with the sawtooth roof? Any long-term maintenance concerns that arose when you looked at that?
As far as like snow pileup is what you're suggesting?
Yeah,
Yeah, we
exactly.
did. I definitely pushed for, that's why there's an intentional like flat roof, meter wide scupper basically between the two. And also some extra effort there on outboard insulation and venting of the kind of vertical face of that. So yeah, definitely was a part of the early discussion. I think one push was to have no flat separation and a true sawtooth with like a 8-inch gutter. And I really didn't feel comfortable with that, obviously, for reasons you brought up. So yes, it has been thought of and intentionally given some extra width and will probably be addressed further in the envelope design.
Well done. I lost a fight on a similar roof on a project, so good on you.
Yeah.
Have you had, so one thing about that road, and just because pulling in and out of the Crescent as a good example, it is a challenge on the Crescent Road getting out of there with the way the traffic moves through that section. Have you had that analyzed at all, just as far as speed of that people tend to travel over that bridge and past that site?
Not formally as far as like a traffic study, but Benny designing this kind of whole subdivision did weigh in on where the road, Strata Road connects. And that was very intentional for sightlines, equally moving that crosswalk and the lights associated with it. So I think the key is the downslope, people coming downslope, having enough visibility of cars coming out of there. So yeah, as much as we could, I think it was addressed and designed accordingly. I mean, again, I think we're 10 units, so it's not an in-out situation. It's going to be pretty minor traffic.
Okay, great. Julian, did you try to do a green roof on top of those shed roofs in the backyard? It just seems like it's a prime spot for.
It is a
green
prime
roof.
spot, and I would love to do a green roof, but unfortunately the budget didn't allow it.
Okay. I see that there is lock block as well as a rock stack proposed. Have you looked into any products that could be planted, something like a Flex MSE or similar, just to green up that rock stack location?
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
But you have looked at it, but not.
Right now, we were going for basically something that was pretty budget conscious with the amount of earth that we're moving around. But absolutely, I think it's a nice idea for sure.
Okay.
Even if
And
we
then,
use it in just certain areas, I think it'd be a good thing to do.
yeah, it's a fascinating product.
Yeah.
That's great. And I guess the last one is, it is mostly west facing with some tree cover. You do have that one south facing unit that I think probably on the upper stories could potentially have probably the best view of all of them. Did you ever look at an alternative treatment just to that one unit that has some south facing access?
Yeah, we did. That's basically the upper window is master bedroom, master bath. So there is some obvious privacy concerns when the west view is more private, and equally we'll have amazing view of the Tantalus. So that the one upper window is that kind of back double bedroom, oversized room. So I think that was the effort placed to giving that room a special, view to the south and the chief, and instead prioritizing some budget and view from the living room and kitchen, which will have the same view to the chief and over the park, will be a really nice feature of that south unit.
Okay, great. That's all the questions I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Catherine is next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
There we go. I just had a question about the asphalt along the side, and it's on in terms of stormwater management. What's the plan for, maybe just could you speak to the stormwater management from the concrete, the asphalt?
I can try a bit. Rob, unfortunately, isn't with us. Would speak a bit better. I didn't hear you too well. It was a question: stormwater management and the asphalt treatment of the Strata Road. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Asphalt was kind of the only logical option, given we have two really major trunk lines, sewer and water underneath. So inevitably, this is going to be dug up multiple times by the district, and they don't want to have to replace the cost of something like a cobblestone or a paver. So that drove the decision for asphalt: easy to cut, easy to patch. And basically all the stormwater from the site that's collected and isn't just naturally percolating is being brought to that Strata Road, to an infiltration line, and then out back towards the boulevard. So it's kind of like the catchment for quite a bit of downslope movement of water throughout the whole site.
Okay. Yeah, those were my questions, actually, because I was just going to ask if there was any consideration of a permeable paver, even for, say, the pathway, to create a little delineation so that it's not just asphalt, or is that kind of given the...
Yeah, we tried.
You tried.
We tried. Yeah, and it's not just client driven, that's pushed back from the district for maintenance and engineering. So wherever else we have basically permeable surfaces at the back patios, the maintenance path access, and then the whole rear yard is no hardscape really. So I'd say the 90% of the site is permeable or planted or forested, and realities of that drive aisle and what it needs to do long term, we were really handcuffed. We did try early on though. Would have been nice.
We did.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks for your question.
Okay, I'm good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Catherine. Kareem, would you like to go?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Thanks for the presentation. I want to start by saying I understand that this is a difficult site, given all the requirements and setbacks and things you mentioned. I do have a couple of questions. I'm not entirely clear on how this topography works, to be honest with you. I don't know if I'm missing something, but if I understand correctly, you described a bench, and it seems to me that your yards, is there going to be a significant cut and fill component here? Because are they like, what's the relationship of the southernmost unit and the new wall that will be constructed, the retaining wall? Are you going to be out in your yard, and in front of you within a few meters is this wall?
Basically, the best way to think about it is the living level walks out to grade at the back of the property. So that's pretty close to the existing second level bench that's there. We do need to pull some soil from that south end and fill to the north end. And even we're going to be importing quite a bit of fill to fill that larger wedge of backyard space so all the units can walk out to the back. There were those kind of schematic sections I did show with which unit 10 is definitely a tighter proximity to those rock stacks at the back of the property like you're referring to, but they've got a 15-foot wide patio terrace before that and another 1.5 meters before a 4-foot high retaining wall with plantings, and then it steps back another 1.5 meters roughly. So really only unit 10 is affected a little bit, and they also have access to the south side yard, which is like a bonus garden for them that's more or less going to be private. Once you get to unit 8 and 9, it really opens up quite a bit more to that back second level yard space. Does that help clarify it a bit?
Okay. Yeah. It's going to be some lots of and you mentioned that you're going to have to import lots of fill here. The other question I had, and you briefly mentioned that you spoke with the fire department. I don't know if you need to clarify this with them at an early stage, but looking at your drawing, I can see that you've marked an 85-meter dimension from the front door of the last unit to sort of the start of that garbage room or the beginning of the first unit, correct? My understanding of the code is that the maximum sort of dead end for a fire truck is 90 meters, and they're not going to be able to turn here. Just looking at the size of it, I'm not sure if you tested this, but it looks like they're going to have to back up all the way to the boulevard, and that will definitely be more than 90 meters. So unless they're okay with sort of getting to this larger area, I'm just afraid that it might come back and kind of bite you in the butt. So if that's something to just check early on.
Yeah, we did actually start with that and talk to both the building department at Squamish, myself, the code consultant, and fire department. Being a Part 9 building, we can have a dead end corridor. There isn't that requirement for a turnaround, albeit we were trying to provide a turnaround early on, just as extra due diligence. So all those parties and departments were consulted kind of from day one, because the buildings actually came second to the site planning. So the hydrant location was a part of that, where it made sense for staging for the fire truck or pumper truck. All those things were in really early conversations. And I'm sure will be flushed out even further after development permit into building permit stage.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. Brent has joined us, if anyone has noticed, and you're next, Brent, if you'd like to ask some questions.
Great, thanks, John, and sorry for being late. Thanks for the presentation, Chris and Julian. The only question I had was, so where the Strata Road enters, exits off of the boulevard, just wondering with the interaction with the existing pathway sidewalk that runs adjacent to the boulevard. And I see that I think the crosswalk's being relocated, but just wondering if this driveway ramp, sort of how that integrates with the existing sidewalk path there.
Sure, yeah, I mean, again, it's a little outside of my design side because Civil would design it, but the intent is the sidewalk would run through and a curb let down to the street, much like a normal kind of driveway entrance. And the current sidewalk currently runs through that, drops down to the let down and up the other side. But I don't think there is a plan to perpendicularly turn the sidewalk towards the site. So if people were to use this strata road as a walk path, they would walk down the strata road, not on a separate dedicated pedestrian path. So that the existing sidewalk would continue through just like it does now.
Okay. I think, and I guess one last question is, like a delivery truck, would it be expected to turn around in the strata road aisle, or would it be the same expectation that they would either park near the trash room or in the visitor parking space and walk to the door where they're delivering?
Yeah, we were trying to encourage the garbage zone. There's a bit of a width, a single parking width there for maintenance vehicles like strata maintenance or park maintenance. And I would think that would be the logical place, more of a strata issue to maybe signage, tell them not to go down. It is quite a wide strata road. Like we only had to do a 6 meter, and we've actually got kind of an extra 3 meters there in width. So a multi-point turn for a smaller van isn't out of the question. Like think of a spud vehicle, sprinter van or something like that, but a large truck, you know, probably not, probably more of a signage thing with the strata to get ahead of that. It is a dead end road.
Great, that's all for me, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. I have a couple questions myself at the end here. I'm wondering if, as far as this walking trail that's goes through the property right now, which has actually been in use for 20 plus years, because I have used it myself many times. I'm just wondering, have other options been explored, and what are they as far as delineating that and following the instructions of DPA 3, which says it should be separated?
Yeah, so yes, multiple. Jules might add a bit, but I think I could say there's 2 other routes that were explored. One coming up into the backyard space, basically at a lower grade, and walking along that east retaining walls. That brought with it some, you know, not great things about privacy and using that backyard space, getting up to that grade and making it accessible. I think would detract from why people walk down the flat area now. So the second one would be there is still an existing pathway going down slope of the development that connects to a new pathway, I believe, further south through the single family neighborhood. So you could walk through that forested pathway and connect to that lower new development, which is all the single family lots being built right now. So I think the Strata Road does a few things for us. It gives us a paved, accessible connection, you know, all weather. It's going to be lit with downlighting at night, so it provides a bit of safety for that connection to the park, and the client is willing to put a accessible right of way for pedestrians. So they, you know, we know there's some security in accessing this center park area. So long short of it is yes, 2 other areas were explored, and we've kind of providing two connection paths.
Okay, I'm going to stick to questions for now. I'm just wondering if you have evidence that this shared scenario in townhome development exists elsewhere on a well-used trail.
In Squamish, are you looking for,
Yes,
or in general in the world?
Certainly in Squamish alone.
No, I don't know of one in particular in Squamish that connects through, like this does, connects through. You know, there already is 2 other main connections to the park, one through a staircase from the upper development, and then further south from that other neighborhood. Those are the intentional ones. But I can't think offhand for an example. I do know the new standards with the district for laneway guidelines downtown. They're trying to do a similar paint shared roadway width in the lanes downtown. So it's kind of stemming from that a bit. And then internationally, there's quite a few examples, but not that I know of, but I'm open to all ears if you know of any.
A third question would be, is part of, you know, I'm not aware really of a specific sub-area plan for trails network up there, but we do know that this owner has several other properties they're developing. So was there an existing plan that has been in place as far as the university sub area for trails networking and how to get through? Because yeah, obviously this trail leads to the other side of the university, which goes up into a very well used set of trails up at the end of Mount Quam Road.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, John. I hadn't been involved in kind of the master plan side of things. I do know the one to the south through the forest does connect to a new paved, and there's some areas where it's like chip bark mulch in the undeveloped areas.
Mm-hmm.
So it does connect through, and I think Auburn's just been consistently in talks with SORCA and the other trail kind of committees that weigh in on it. And from my understanding, they've been very flexible and accommodating to provide those, maintain those accesses. People obviously move here for the reasons of being really close to great trail access, and that's always a contentious issue. So I don't know the specifics, but I know it has been in conversation and efforts have been made. Maybe Jonas or Brian might be able to speak to that.
You got a comment there, Jonas or Brian?
There hasn't been a specific plan outlined for the trails, but there is just policies in the university sub-area plan that spoke to maintaining and enhancing trails in existing locations or in future locations. And the Ring Creek Falls Trail, that's sort of, it's not illustrated on the site plan, but it's still on this parcel just west. And the proponent has offered a statutory right-of-way for public access on that trail as well, which it currently does not have. So just note that as well.
Yeah. Just to note that it is actually a very key trail that runs through the property and obviously very beneficial to this developer for their upcoming developments beyond this site, of course. So, but I'll reserve further for my comments. That's all my questions. Does anyone else have any other questions before we move to comments? No more questions. Okay.
I have one question.
Yes.
Just a question about the metal planters. I'm just wondering what they are, and are they painted to match, or what is the material and color of the planters?
To be determined. So we originally started talking about Corten, but we're very conscious that Corten was kind of a material out on its own, and we weren't using that anywhere else. So we'd like to tie it back to the buildings. So it's likely to be powder coated, either galvanized steel, powder coated galv, or powder coated aluminum. Those are the two options that we're really kind of thinking of. But it's going to be in a color that matches that we'll pull from the building.
Okay, so you're not looking at something that expressly contrasts it. You want it to blend in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I have one more question, actually. Could I ask a question?
Sure, Catherine.
In terms of the width of the strata road, and in between the trail and the kind of the road, is there room for planter boxes to create a delineation between the trail and the an existing road, or is that do you not have enough space to have vehicles turn around, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I don't think we have enough space. We did look at it, like the idea of a separated sidewalk, basically, or trail. But the ripple effect of that, pushing that retaining wall out another, let's call it 2 meters to make that happen and have separation, really wasn't viable at all. So we thought it was better to use that space to just give that extra 1.5 meters to the width of the strata road. And again, I think it's 10 units, and the amount of traffic isn't a ton of people. I think it's well used, like John said. Like I use it all the time, going on bike rides and such. I think it's a short area, but it'll be a quick, quite nice little laneway connection. So yeah, we did look at it, but that extra width to do it properly and not have like a 2 foot wide or 3 foot wide sidewalk to actually make it to proper standards wasn't viable.
Thanks.
Okay, Catherine. Okay, we'll move to comments, and I'll come back to David for first comment.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I think overall it's an interesting project with some really sort of strong design features. I think it aligns well with the design of the townhouses in the rest of the University Heights, but it's set apart in its own way. I would maybe like to see some features that make identity of individual units a little bit easier. I appreciate that each unit has a sort of covered entrance, but believe maybe some color or materiality to break up the rhythm of those entrances, so you can kind of identify which unit's yours or which one you're going to might be of benefit to the development. With the planting to the west, appreciate all the comments there about the prickly bushes and things, but would be good to see maybe some fencing or just some requirement for a set height of those planters. As you know, I imagine kids playing, riding bikes, kicking footballs, don't want anything to go over the edge there. Similar to one of Carlos's questions, I'd really like to see that retaining wall be planted if possible. I mean, there's a pretty monstrous wall above, so it'd be nice to separate yourself from that. If it is a Part 9 building, it would be interesting to see if this does kick you into push into step 5, is to allow that 10th unit to occupy that varied space. But yeah, overall great unique design and great addition to Squamish, so thank you.
Thanks, David. We'll go to Christina.
Thanks. I agree. I think it's a really interesting project. I think it's a very sort of unique identity for a development. And I like the way that the landscape design complements the contemporary architecture. So I think it's appropriate that that things are in linear patterns and they denote sort of boundaries and movement that way. I think that's a great approach. And I also appreciate making an effort to have an open space that's unprogrammed, that's relatively flat, that you can use for throwing a ball or lying on the grass or whatever. So I think that's great as well. And also the use of the primarily native plants, I think, is really appropriate. I like the idea of the different plants in the front. And when I was asking the question about the planter, I was actually thinking sort of along the lines of what David just said about trying to create maybe a bit of a unique identity per unit. And you might be able to achieve that with the planters. So I know you're thinking about putting different vignettes of native plants in the front, and that might be enough, but maybe you might want to consider having the planters be different every second unit or something like that, like complementary but different, in order to create some interest and movement along the front. I think that, and I also echo the idea of having a planted wall or maybe even a gabion system, where you could intersperse with planting and maybe some other interesting materials in the gabion cages. I think with using the private development as a way to access the park, and probably some additional effort will have to be made in order to create confidence for people to walk through the private development. I think whether it be signage, I think you've made a great effort at something really interesting on the ground plane, but maybe it's some kind of a gateway or something on either end. It could be in terms of plant material as well, potentially, just so that people know they can access and walk through. I think overall it's a nice project, and I think it does fit in, but it also has its unique identity. So good work. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. Sarah will be next.
Okay, yeah, I echo what everybody else has said. I think that the project is being very thoughtful for, trying to fit within the confines of the topography and other challenges. I like particularly the covered areas. I think that that's great use of space. One thing that I would like to see is to, though there is going to be a significant grade change, is to make sure that the gravel pathway is compact, rolled, and it's a hard surface, because that would allow these units to be sort of semi-visitable. It would allow people to come in through the back door and have a meal or a cup of tea with someone, which I think is really important. And having said that, then I noticed that there's sort of 2 pavers in gravel that approach the patio, just to be cognizant of, you know, kind of that area. And I'll leave it in your hands, Julian, but that would allow somebody to easily come through into the unit on the main floor. And following that same vein is, I would encourage you to put a power source somewhere on the landing between the bottom stairs and the upstairs, if for any future installation of a stair lift. This unit obviously will never be a wheelchair accessible unit, but for somebody with mobility challenges that comes with old age or broken leg, that could be really useful and wouldn't be a significant cost. But overall, I think it's great, and I have no problem with the encroachments. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Amy, are you ready?
Yeah, again, I think it's lovely. The landscaping, I think, sounds really beautiful. And what I particularly like is also that that unprogrammed space, that sort of flex space. I think that's a great addition.
Thank you. Okay, Carlos will be next.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Overall, I think the project is quite supportable. I went on Google Earth while we were chatting here and for Street View, and I'm not as concerned with the downhill traffic. I think you've got some decent sight lines there, but maybe just double check that with an engineer. It's a little stormtrooper in its color scheme, which I'm actually okay with. I think it looks good, but it's definitely gonna. It's probably in the extreme side of that, which I'd love to see a bit of wood. Chris, I know you like black, white, and wood, so I'd love to see a little bit of wood in there if you could, but I get the intention to make it quite robust so that those stratas don't have to pay for the refinishing. It's pretty dense in its expression from the street edge, and so I think because of that, and because you've opted to not have any kind of separations between the units, it probably opens up some space to do a bit more, maybe with the landscaping. So maybe I think it would be very supportable if you guys brought in a kind of sedge mat or a green roof for that shed, just so it blends into that environment a bit more from above. And yeah, if you're gonna have to do lock blocks, like maybe look at a Ready Rock product, or even better, a Flex MSE or something that you can put some planting medium on. Just I know there are precedents around there that didn't do that, but I think we all can agree that it's definitely, there are better ways to do it. Just really happy to see a sawtooth roof. Prove me right for the next one that I do, Chris, and just make sure you get the detailing dial there so I don't hear any stories. And I agree that shared backyard space is going to do wonders to sell that product, and I think it's going to create a real cool kind of micro community there. So it's a huge asset. So that's all the comments I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Carlos. Catherine will be next.
Hi, I can't see Chris. I keep thinking I could figure out who was speaking. Is he just not in the view?
I'm not sure how to turn it on. I assumed I was on, but I might not be. Sorry.
I couldn't figure out who the presenter was. I thought it was Carlos. I could see his lips moving. Now I know it's not. Anyways, so thanks, Chris and Julian, for your for this project. I really like it. I think the colors are going to hopefully stand the test of time. The white will be interesting to see how that unfolds over time. But I like the color scheme. I like the roof lines. I love the open space, and that you've also included meadow. That's something that I think is really important for attracting pollinators and other species, and just also not having a sea of turf. I like the inclusion of the native plants, and I also support the idea of using an MSE product to plant into for the retaining wall. I think we've got plenty of lock block walls in Squamish, and we do need to do better. I also think the there will be potentially a little bit of a conflict with the public walking through or riding their bikes along that the Strata Road. So it's unfortunate that we can't have some kind of separation. So maybe again some signage and something to help delineate that space. But yeah, I love the shared space on that other side in the backyards. I think it's forward thinking. So good job. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Kareem, next on the list, please.
Yep. I also really like the sawtooth. I think it's bold, but I think you can go a little bolder with the sort of the proportions of your frame. To me, they come across a little thin. I would make them a little maybe wider and sort of emphasize that sawtooth frame. I'm a little concerned with the repetition. It's been mentioned a couple of times, similar to the idea of not knowing sort of your unit or a visitor. I appreciate the neatness and the cleanness of your palette, but all units are sort of the same datum. Sort of even your sort of louvers, your shading devices are all on the same level. They're all the same height, and it'll create sort of a very long strip of beige. And I feel like maybe there's an opportunity. I know you mentioned that you didn't want to have side by side entries, and that's fine. But maybe there's an opportunity to sort of break that 10 unit repetition with either maybe introduce another beige color to these louvers, or have them, I don't know, some of them taller than others. If you don't want to play with your roof lines or your entries, it's again, I support the bold move. I like the palette. I just think you can fine tune a bit of the proportions and a bit of the and maybe decrease repetition. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. And Brent, next.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks again for the presentation. Sort of echo the comments of the rest of the panel. I think that overall the project looks great, and I think that a little bit of additional variation between the units, whether that's color or some of the features that Christina or Kareem are speaking to, would be something that I think could add to the project. I like the shared concept, sort of rolling both front and back of the property or the buildings. I think that I could see kids playing ball or something in the paved area in the front, and then families sort of congregating in the grass behind. And so I'd sort of echo what David had said, that I think that recognizing how steep that slope is, that it's really important that that's going to be safe for kids running, chasing balls, riding their bikes, learning how to walk. So I like the use of the speed table and the sort of rumble strip colored section coming into the parking area, the Strata Road. I think that that's kind of a neat way to change space. And even though it is just a big open asphalt shared Strata Road, I think it helps add a little bit of color to what is like a pretty, like dark sort of massing and finish, which I think can hopefully remains bright. I know sometimes these pavement markings can look great when they go on new and don't always wear the way you want them to. So just sort of be careful when selecting suppliers and how they're being installed. I think, makes a pretty big difference. And then my one last comment is on the existing pathway, sort of coming back to that and looking at the landscape plan. Just be conscious of, I've seen kids riding their bikes down the hill on that path. And so I think that as a driver, if you're over that speed table, you're looking uphill to see if you have a clear opening for traffic, making sure that those sight lines are clear for if there was a kid riding down the hill, you can actually be going pretty quick and potentially not in the driver's main sight line. So as I use, looks as though it sort of limit some of those sight lines. So Yeah, I think that's all for me.
Thanks, Brian. Okay. So I have a couple comments. I think you know where I'm going to go with this. Aside from saying, Chris, thanks very much. I appreciate the site is challenging, and what you've done here is interesting. I personally agree with Kareem. Would like to see some differentiation. Would love to see the building split perhaps in 2, 5 and 5, something like that, rather than the long line of 10. But that has its challenges as well. I do see space at the end there, though, so it could be possibly done. So my comments are going to revolve around the pathway through, and I'm just going to refer to the DP Area 3 guidelines, and 36.5A states, provide universal design features such as accessible pedestrian routes through the development separated from parking and lanes. So it says meets guideline, but I would say it does not meet the guideline. That should be noted in the minutes. I feel that this is, if you haven't seen it elsewhere in Squamish, then we are setting a precedent. I think there's that warrants some extra examination on this. I feel that it is a critical pathway in the area as part of the sub-area plan that benefits the same developer and lots of people that go through the site, have been going through the site for 20 years. If you buy a unit in one of these 10 and you have people, including kids, who stray constantly, I have a 5-year-old, I know, it's going to be a mix of cars and people. There's privacy issues. There's the people in those units inevitably will become, some of them will be, I imagine, not too happy about it being a shared space. So I honestly feel that it warrants a look at a third option and some separation between that pathway and the driveway, whether it be a fenced area and involves perhaps an elevated boardwalk over the portions that are steep on the end there. I know it can be done. I have built things like that myself in the past, and it's not that cost prohibitive, let's put it that way. Although I understand your inclination to try and avoid it. But I do think this trail is very, will become more and more used as you have infill above, and it will become very busy, and then you're looking at a problem for future strata owners there, and this is something we need to address properly at this point. So that's my comment on that. I feel fairly strongly about it. I'm hoping that will be taken in the right way. Does anyone else have any comments at the end? No further comments? Okay, so we move to recommendations. I'm going to read them out as I do. Recommendation is A, that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and does not need to see the project return. Recommendation B is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve following specific recommendations that we would list. Recommendation C is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project to advisory design panel. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project as presented for the following reasons. Can I open for discussion on which of the recommendations? My suggestion would be C, and citing that this delineation and separation of the pathway should be something solved by working with staff and then brought back to the advisory design panel.
John, would it be worthwhile to hear from the planning department as to their thoughts around it? I mean, they did clearly write that it met the guideline, and I agree with you. It doesn't. So what can we maybe hear from them, what their rationale behind that was?
My apologies. It should have read partially meets guidelines. So it is not separated, but I thought that it was a reasonable solution given the constraints on the site. But if ADP feels that this warrants another look and would like to be brought back and seen again, I think that is a reasonable recommendation for you guys.
It is a precedent. That's why I bring that up.
Yeah, I support what John has brought up. I think it is worthwhile. I think there's going to be conflict, and I think it is setting precedent. It'd be great to have these public areas, these public accesses clearly delineated, and that's something that we expect from the developers. I know it's a pain in the ass, but I do think it's worth it.
I agree. I think it could set a precedent, and it's worthwhile making sure that we get it right.
Yeah, I mean, the same developer stands to benefit, and having happy customers at the end of the day, I'm sure is something that's important to them.
Can I just ask a clarifying question there?
Yes.
So there is an existing right-of-way over this parcel. Is that correct?
No, there is not for this.
So am I correct in the statement saying that there is a trail on private property that's been used for quite a bit that has no right-of-way over top of it and is now being replaced with a right-of-way access?
That's right.
Okay. That being the case, if I would personally support B over C, because I think this is something that can be worked out with staff, and I think there's a lot of cases in this town where we have had legacy use on private lands. And I just don't know if it's fair to the applicant. Like, I agree with the principles, and I do believe that staff can work through this issue. Ultimately, it's their choice before it goes to council. Because there's not a right of way in place there now, I think it's supportable to move this project forward as presented. But that's how I'll vote if brought forward as a motion.
Well, I think it's a critical trail that benefits the developer in his future sites as well, and it should be done properly at the end of the day. I think you do bring up the question of whether or not the trail is justifiable only because it's been used in the past, and that's, I think, is a separate question, which I respect. But I think if we are going to do a trail through there, which I think this developer probably wants at the end of the day, I think that the way to do it needs to be examined more thoroughly.
Yeah, and John, just to clarify, I think I agree with you largely on that point. I just think it can be worked out at the staff level, because ultimately there are aspects of this design that we're not privy to, including, grading concerns, setbacks from RAR, the trade-off between, the treatment along that edge versus it being expanded with a boardwalk or something like that. But I think I agree with this sentiment. I just don't know that it needs to come back to us and can be dealt with prior to going to council.
I agree, but I didn't see a third. I didn't hear that a third option. There is a third option. I didn't hear that it had been looked at, and I would personally like to see that option looked at and brought back to us so that we can make that decision. I think council would appreciate that as well. But at any rate, I'm going to put. I would ask for someone to motion for item C, so that we can vote on that if that's okay with everyone out there.
I also just want to say one thing is that I didn't realize that it was a legacy, what we call a legacy trail. I thought it was actually a public right of way. I still support bringing it back to us, but I just want to clarify that for myself.
Yeah.
I forward the motion for C.
Thank you. Second. Can I get a second, Kareem? And now we'll call anyone against. Carlos against. Sarah against. Brent.
And me.
And David.
Yeah.
Okay. So as it stands, we have enough to pass it C. We haven't had a really close vote like this, I don't think, since these new processes are put in place. So I was told to go a little bit more slowly the next time I made the But we do have 4 against, and the rest are for, and so it does pass. Item C does pass. Okay, any other comments, Brian,
So is this,
before we wrap?
to clarify,
Yes.
this is primarily to do with the trail and not to do with how you see the fronts of the buildings. Is that right?
Primarily about the trail and delineating it from the driveway, or separating it from the driveway, and so as to avoid future issues.
But if I may jump in here, while, you know, if we're going with C, I invite the applicant to look at all the comments that were made, those about materials, those about repetition, and so on.
Right, but how do we figure out how, you know, how much of the panel is for changing up what exists versus wanting to see some changes? Because I'm perfectly happy and think that what's presented is what I'd like to see. So is there a method, John, for us to then weigh how important we see these things?
Absolutely. I understand where you're getting at, and I actually agree with you. In other aspects of the project, I don't have any problems with that either. I'm personally specifically focused on this, on the trail issue, and I think that's mainly what we voted on. But if there's any other items that are outstanding that anyone else wants to bring up as a recommendation to have worked on before they come back, they could make that comment at this time, and Kareem has, but if anyone else wants to bring anything up other than the trail.
I support Kareem's thoughts. I don't know the details of how complicated that's going to be, and I'm sure they've gone through different notions around the space. But if there is a way to break it up a little bit in terms of not just having a straight line, I think that would be a benefit
Okay.
to the overall design.
Yeah, but now we're talking about different things altogether, because that's changing the orientation of the building so that it's either going to be angled or curved or something, versus changing up materials, having different colored doors, having different plantings at doors, right? Like there's a whole, so we need to be really clear about what it is that we're asking, as opposed to sort of going, oh, well, that's a straight line, we need to change that.
Well, Sarah, I think that, you know, quite often as we go through this, we have a number of comments that are recorded in the minutes, and these are items that we, you know, let's say we've voted for B and we've asked staff to work on these recommendations. You know, the only difference with going with C is we'd like them to come back and show us what they've done with the recommendations that we've made. So the recommendations are recorded per our comments, as they always would have been in other, let's say if we had voted for recommendation B, same thing.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yep. Carlos.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think the bar for bringing projects back should be at a level potentially higher than this. I have a lot of trust in our staff in the district to work through a lot of these issues. And so that's my position on this matter. I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. And I mean, my request for this item C mostly stems from the fact that it's setting a precedent in our town, and I think it's that important that we should bring it back for that reason, and we've obviously voted so. So any other comments? Otherwise, I think we'll recess for 10 minutes and come back at 3:55 for the next project. And say thanks very much to Chris and Julian.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we'll start now. The next item of business is DP 568, Presentation Center, Priority Project. And I'll hand off to our planner, Jesse Fletcher.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Advisory Design Panel. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the District of Squamish, and here to introduce an application for a development permit for a new commercial building featuring a presentation center and restaurant located at the south end of the oceanfront peninsula. The proposed building is located within the village center of the oceanfront and zoned Comprehensive Development Zone 69 within Block A. The proposed building will have a gross floor area of approximately 1,500 square meters. The proposed development is located within Development Permit Area 12, Oceanfront Sub-Area Plan, and is subject to the guidelines listed under subsections 6.7, 6.8, and 6.14, all of which are attached to your staff report today. This project has not previously been presented to the advisory design panel. The project is providing 100% employment space outside of the Sea to Sky Business Park, so is being processed under the priority development policy. And I see that my mic is muffled, so I'm hoping you can hear me somewhat. I am on a headset, Tori, so can you hear me somewhat?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, awesome. So priority projects only need to go to advisory design panel once, regardless of advisory design panel's thoughts, and we have revised recommendations under section 5 of the staff report. Some items of note, there are 2 variances with this project. The first is to parking. The applicant is proposing 50 stalls where 70 are required. However, a parking study is currently underway that may determine that a lesser amount is appropriate. Parking will be provided off-site. The second variance is to the height. The applicant is seeking a variance to 13.1 meters from the allowable 10-meter height. The majority of the building does meet the height, and the variance is to accommodate a viewing platform. So staff is seeking ADP comments and recommendations regarding the form and character of the proposed development, including the site plan, architectural design, building material and exterior finish, and landscape plan. Staff is also requesting additional input regarding the building's relationship with the public realm, in addition to comments on the aforementioned items. So I'll hand it over now to the project architect, Stefan Leroy.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be presenting today. My name is Stefan Leroy. I'm an architect and urban planner and principal at SLA. And I'm joined today by Carlos Avarche, who I believe most of you know well, and also Joseph Fry from PFS Collaborative. HAPA Collaborative, my apologies. We are really honored to be participating in this project. And as we initiated the first stages of the design and did little design charrettes with our client, one of the items that was brought up, one of the goals that was brought up was it would be wonderful if we could design a building that was a welcoming, warm hug. And we thought that would be an interesting design narrative, that could we actually achieve a building that was so warm and welcoming and merited the site that this one is on. Good start. Okay, mouse. The site is truly incredible. It is at the far end of the oceanfront lands, surrounded by water and stunning mountains. But design panel, is being asked to review the building design, and we felt it was important, critical, in fact, to get a sense of the overall context of the site and what the future held. And the master plan shows a thriving, complete community. And one of the significant design elements is the extension of Cleveland Avenue, the extension of the downtown to an oceanfront park. And the oceanfront park will be serviced and helped animated by the building that we're talking about today. As one thinks about this site, you might be thinking of the site in this way, that it's wide open. There might be some preload there today, and it's probably significantly challenging to visualize what this building is going to look like on that site in the future. This is the vision for the oceanfront site, for the oceanfront lands, and specifically the site that we're referring to today. And as we get closer in, you start to have a sense of the scale of the community and the impact that this public park will have on this community. Some of the adjacencies that are worth considering. The master plan refers to this area of the site. I won't go too fast because the connection's slow. As an urban village or a town center, pedestrian scale, human scale, 2-story buildings. To the southwest is a hotel site, access by harbor air, and access to a sailing center. And this is all surrounded by a very large public park. In the midst of all this is the building we're talking about today. So I mentioned interim condition. The far left graphic represents what the site is going to look like when we finish construction. But in the very near future, the site will be surrounded by a community and a beautiful park, but also a lot of public parking. All of the developments in this, and all of the projects in this development will have one level of public accessible below grade parking. The site will also be surrounded by extensive multi-use paths and sidewalks, lots of very good porosity through the master plan, through the overall site. Also bicycle access and bike paths and bike trails throughout the site, and transit. There will be transit eventually right to the end of the oceanfront. As we began to look at the site in the context, we identified how incredible Squamish is, some of the incredibly important influences on the site, including the vertical scale, of Squamish, the chief, black tusk, but also the oceanfront vernacular of a human-scaled building made of natural products, natural materials. And as we explored the nature of a site at the end of a peninsula surrounded by ocean, we imagined a building that could become a beacon, a lighthouse at the end of that land, but also be open and welcoming. We did a number of explorations in how to fit the program into the site. And we settled on what is essentially an intertwining of the uses, that we have a presentation center and a brew pub or public house that are able to take advantage of all of those site features and sun access. We did the same exercise as we looked at the massing of the building, and we identified really two vernacular typologies. One, a long shed building, and a second, perhaps in spirit, looking at the chief or black tusk, a vertical element, a beacon, providing opportunities for views out, and also a marker for the site. Once we had that massing, we saw opportunities for outdoor seating, and also, again, for views out and views in. So it's actually a very complicated program. The building is trying to do a lot of different things. And as we developed the schematic design, there were more and more, the agenda got longer and longer, and we were very excited by that. Many of the items were sustainable features and sustainable initiatives, while also looking at building typology, building materials, and construction materials. Also trying to use this building as a way to inform future development on the site. So there's a real focus on carbon and a real focus on renewable energy. One of the other studies that we performed was we recognized that the mountains that surround Squamish have a significant impact, obviously visually, but from a solar impact point of view. And as we modeled the terrain around Squamish, we were able to identify the impact that those mountains have on access to sun on this site. We wanted to make sure that as we considered the design, that we still had wonderful opportunities to access the sun while also providing clarity on the extent of available glazing, particularly on the northwest face. In a traditional site, the northwest face is very difficult to glaze due to all of the solar gain and all the heat gain. But on this site, we have an opportunity to provide a lot of glazing overlooking that plaza without the penalty of heat gain, which you see here in the bottom right corner at 7 p.m., 7:15 p.m. In the evening, not a.m. You are in the shade on this site in the middle of summer. In the winter time, that time becomes 6:20-ish in the evening. So we looked again in more detail at the glazing, specifically on the northwest corner, and also, of course, the effectiveness that the photovoltaics would have on the north or south side of that roof. In terms of the overall site planning, the entrances to the presentation center and the brewery public house are facing the street and are very open and welcoming. There's a loading access on the south side, and we'll talk in a little bit more detail of how we deal with recycling and garbage here in a shared way. You have the plaza and the adjacent parking. We spent some time making sure that the lighting of the site would be pedestrian oriented. Benches that we're proposing would have integrated lighting, but that the building felt like a warm and welcoming beacon, both from the outside looking in, but also from the inside looking out. The site lighting is low level, modest, dark sky compliant, and that on the south side where we have loading, we're proposing motion activated lighting, typical flood lighting, if you like. The rest of the site is completely pedestrian oriented. I won't go into detail on the statistics, but generally speaking, 1556 is the square footage of the project. Lot coverage is 69%. We have, as Jesse mentioned, we've requested 2 variances. The first is for height. We mentioned the word beacon a number of times. We felt that this was an opportunity to have the building rise up and be visible from a distance, but also on the one hand from Cleveland from orientation point of view, but also from users in the park to look back at the development and see that building. It also provided an opportunity to have an elevated deck and event space with views, 360-degree views, which I'll show on the plan in a moment. The second variance request is regarding parking. We are beginning a parking study, a shared parking study. I showed a plan a moment ago of all of the extensive amounts of below-grade parking, and we believe that there will be ample public parking throughout the site. In terms of the sustainable initiatives, we are proposing mass timber structure, which is a sustainable and renewable resource, is made of BC wood. It will sequester carbon. It's also a very beautiful material, and it's also a full life cycle material that it can be disassembled and reused, but it can also be composted. Renewable energy, I mentioned photovoltaics on the south side of the roof, and we're also looking at potentially harnessing the wind. There's already site-wide stormwater management. We'll be focusing on native planting. There's ample bike parking. There is a lot of bike path and pedestrian paths throughout the site that we are connecting to. And the design, we have been very considerate in our design for the future use of the project. That it's not just a sales center like you would see in any development. This is a building that can be reused in the future and in a number of ways. It won't just be in one option. There are many potential options. I'll just quickly walk through the floor plans. The entrance to the sales center is on the east side, northeast corner. And as one enters, you enter a warm and welcoming space with views directly out to the plaza. And as users continue, they'll want to explore this large-scale model of the project. And again, lots of opportunities to look out at this plaza and activate the plaza, but also opportunities for users of the plaza to look back into the sales center and see the activities that are occurring in the space. There's views, but also access on the northwest corner of the sales center. And there's also a second seating area that looks out to the street. There's sometimes we refer to the demonstration or sales area of these sales centers as a black box. This particular one is designed to be able to accommodate sales in 2 separate projects, split in this direction. We chose to put that in the middle or the heart of the building, if you like, buried inside. And the entrance to the brew pub is adjacent to that, with opportunities to view in and see the activities that are happening in the brewery. We haven't yet secured a tenant in this space, so we want to make sure that this space can be reused or used as a CRU. So it's not just a big empty void. Once you enter the brew pub, lots of views from the indoor seating, lots of opportunities for outdoor seating, but also we're accommodating people coming up from the park in various locations to access the brew pub. And also we're proposing an opportunity for a takeout window, which in the last year would be quite successful, but even as an ongoing service, it's be kind of interesting to be able to grab a burger and go and sit in the park without having to sit in the restaurant. The mezzanine level has a lot of openness to it, that the boardroom and the administration spaces have lots of views in and out, but also views out to the public plaza. And again, users of the public plaza can look up and in and see the activity within that space. And the same, of course, occurs in the brew pub. Lots of views from the second level seating and a very large roof patio. The third level is an event space with very large terraces, both on the north and south side. There's incredible views of Atwell, the plaza, the house sound, but there's also a window here to view the magnificent Chief. And the roof plan showing the extent of the photovoltaic array and the potential wind turbines. This is the interior finishes, extensive use of natural materials, the use of wood. We're really showcasing wood on this project. The flooring would be polished concrete. Exterior materials, we're proposing, have some here, hand split yellow cedar shake, as well as aluminum triple glazed windows and galvanized racing metal roof. This is accentuating and reinforcing the oceanside vernacular that we see throughout the coast. One of the wonderful features of the yellow cedar shake that we're particularly excited about is that when the project is completed, it will look beautiful and pristine. But shortly thereafter, it'll begin to take on the character of the site, that depending on the orientation of the wood, that it will change and age in different ways depending on the side of the building that it's located. It'll weather in place. So in terms of the street level and animation and entrances, the entrance to the sales center is marked by a change in materials. We are proposing going from a kind of rough and textured exterior to a smooth and clean edge with lots of views and porosity into the space. Between the sales center and the restaurant brew pub is a highly textured space with lots of visual interests, a sign obviously, as well as bikes and benches and some planting. And looking at the brew pub entrance, we were conscious to pull the entrance back a little so that, as we can imagine, that we're hoping that this restaurant becomes incredibly successful, that people can queue outside or sit on the benches while waiting for a table, but also be able to take advantage of this CLT or mass timber cantilevered canopy. Again, opportunities to view into the space. This northwest view, I mentioned the study so that we could maximize the amount of glazing. We want to maximize the amount of glazing to increase the porosity again into the building, views into the building, but also views out, but also views up and into the building, and views from the upper level down to the plaza. So it's a very open end of that building. And again, I mentioned the entrance to the sales center and opportunities to view in on the northwest corner. This is the entrance to the brew pub that I mentioned a moment ago. Entrance to the sales center and the upper deck. In this view, we're trying to demonstrate how the building will fit into its site and attempt to address the park, that we aren't trying to build an elevated deck with a windscreen. We're trying to allow people to come up and enjoy that deck while still providing wind protection along that outdoor seating, trying to create a very accessible site. I think you can see the impact of the idea of the beacon or wayfinding. This is the interior of the sales center and how open and airy it is. We felt that having this double height space for the sales center also helped future-proof this space, that in the future, when it is no longer a sales center, that this double height space would have more uses, more freedom for uses. In terms of the elevations, I think I've covered all of the exterior materials, but I think you have a better sense of the scale from this elevation. It is all along the roadway is quite a good human scale. It's very open, have lots of eyes on the street, lots of visual cues along the street edge. The northwest side is very open. South side is loading. I mentioned the section. All of this space here is encapsulated in the double height space with views down to the plaza and views from the plaza in. Joe?
Thanks, Stefan. I hope everyone can hear me. I've just spent 5 minutes here talking a bit about landscape, and our role as the landscape architect for this is really looking how to create a more seamless integration of the Oceanfront Discovery Center in its context, and that includes the park, it includes the future civic spaces to the other side of the road, Cleveland itself, and the hotel. So we really looked at a number of references, materials palette, and contextual sort of inspiration to establish our palette and how we integrate things. And we've been working very closely with Anchor Landscape Architects for the park to integrate this site with the plaza and the park site itself. One of the things that we are really evident and probably obvious to everyone is the logging industry, sort of the footprint of that on this site. And we are really excited and have used with great success really heavy timber landscapes to landscape elements that are used for seating, they're used for buffering, they're used for sculptural configurations. And you'll see that in our site plan, how we want to deploy that here. And also take advantage of the grade changes that at 5.1 meters of elevation down into the park elevation, we can create a bit of a pleated edge using these wood elements to to exaggerate the grade or create protection from the roaring winds that sometimes come up the sound and down the sound for that matter. Our plant, and lastly, our plant palette, really very as native as we can make it, actually, using birch on the street side and using shore pine on the water side. More of that upland planting condition, really robust, heavy, like very plant materials that's going to withstand a lot of environmental abuse through wind and sun and driving rain. Go to the next slide. We have our site plan here, and you can see the extent of our scope of work adjacent to the plaza space, which we're again working in combination with Anchor on. The streetscape condition you can see here, where we've created these planting pockets rather than a regular street tree planting. It's groupings of birch trees with, again, a native plant palette using heavy timber benches that provide almost a sort of a buffer edge to the parking, but as Stefan mentioned, sittable edges that while people are waiting or queuing to get into the pub, or maybe even the presentation center. And the planting is really an understory native material that comes around the side of the plaza, and again a lot of porosity, visual porosity to the sales center, and providing seating, planting pockets, and places that allow occupation of that space facing in towards the park or towards the building. And lastly, on the patio side, facing down into the park, where we'd like to create almost a tiered seating arrangement there, using, again, large, robust 12 by 12 beams of wood, and they cascade down to the park edge. They provide openings for mobility, people to walk up to the takeout window, but can also provide a bit of a wind buffer as well if we stack it up a little bit higher than 5.1 and back down to the patio, so it faces in towards the building. The section on the next slide shows how that might happen on the right-hand side of the building. So really creating almost like a ziggurat arrangement of seating that privileges the view out, but also provides a bit of enclosure to the patio. And I think if I could just really quickly on the last slide here, I believe we have showing a context, and this is really just a quick sketch to show how, as a landscape architect, we're really aware of the context of this. And Peter Homelet at Anchor has been a great collaborator on this, working with the park design, the play area, and the extent of the plaza, and how all of this really feels seamless in terms of the paving strategies, the plant material, and the use of accent site furnishings, and that is really of its place, and it's really a fantastic setting. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions on that. It's from the panel.
Thank you.
Okay, is that it for us, Carlos, for our presentation? We'll move into questions.
Shall I stop sharing the screen?
Sure, thanks very much. That's excellent presentation. And I guess what I'm going to do is reverse order on questions here. So we'll start with Brent, if you're ready, Brent.
Sure, thanks, John. Yeah, thanks, Stefan and Joseph. That was a great presentation. Really exciting to see, I guess, what the oceanfront's going to look like, and sort of that first piece. I guess my first question would just be kind of how, looking at the existing site and there's nothing there, just talking about the transition from this building, and as landscape kind of continues to evolve out, and ensuring that it's continues to be permeable, sort of that dynamic between the public space and I guess the brew pub. And just kind of, if you could speak to what, as this is getting built, if you have, I have a hard time envisioning that process, and just sort of, if you could kind of speak to that, that'd be useful for me.
It might be effective for Carlos to answer that, since if he's able to.
Yeah, for sure. There's one of your graphics is great there, Stefan. If I don't know if you're able to pull it up, but it kind of shows that interim condition. So, you know, we're talking about this because we've got a lot of projects coming down the pipe, but the oceanfront, we're treating the oceanfront, we're actually building it up to respond to two major conditions. One's the brownfield nature of the site, and the other is for future potential sea level rise. So we won't have a dike condition like downtown where you have the edges being higher. We're instead opting to build everything up. So when you go onto site currently, you can see the main road's elevated up at about 5 meters geodetic, where the surrounding area is about 2.5 to 3 meters geodetic. So that allows us to provide a lot of the parking underground, built at grade, but underground, which is a unique situation compared to the rest of downtown. It also allows us to be pretty confident in our supply of parking. So that's just a general idea. Going back to your question, Brent. So the intent is that this is under construction while the park is under construction, and that the opening of both are timed relatively close. So what you saw in that last image that had kind of the full perimeter for the park and the presentation center coming online at the same time. We have an interim parking condition because it'll ultimately be shared parking in a variety of spots off site. And that's what it will be. Well, the remainder of our phase 1 is under construction. And so we'll have a very isolated but wonderful area with this public park for the community to go. And then as all of these different units come online, that kind of village, what we would consider the village, starts to grow further and further and further. So yeah, there's going to be some interesting conditions where we'll grade down to existing grade kind of throughout the development of this site.
Okay, thanks, Carlos. I guess a question on sort of the continuous cedar shake and how sort of you spoke to it, like, you know, knowing each of the different elevations is very different here, and the amount of light and how it ages. Just wondering with sort of this fronting side being north facing, and if there's thoughts or concerns on maintenance and whether or not, like, sort of different algae growth or whatever, moss growth is something that you see as being an issue.
Well, between you and I think it'd be great if there was some moss growing on there. I don't know about Carlos, but I think that's exactly the intent. I mean, the south side and any of the yellow cedar that has access to UV light and strong sun will go silver very fast. The north side would have less access to sun, will stay yellow for a lot longer and gently go gray. Eventually, the silver could darken up, but generally, just like a piece of driftwood, it's basically going to be a light gray, silvery building, and with a rough texture. I mean, I think that's the part that is not like a shingle on the side of a house. It's a very traditional and quite thick material. So it's very durable, quite long lasting.
Great. I think that's all my questions for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. Kareem will be next.
Yes, thanks again for the presentation. My question is with regards to program, is the intent, you mentioned quickly that if the brewery does not become a brewery, it's a CRU. What is the vision for the whole structure after the sales center has sort of satisfied its role? Is this building temporary? Is it going to be there forever? What's the idea?
Yeah. The intention is for this building to be here for a very long time. It's being used as a sales center as its first use, and we envision many more uses after that. We've certainly talked about by having a double height space, it could be used as an employment space, could be used as a sports facility like a climbing wall or a gym. You know, it is a destination next to the park, so it could be eventually sport related. But it could also, as much as I tongue in cheek a little bit, it could also be a gallery or an art space. And I say that because it is such an important site. It is a great place to showcase art as well.
Nice. The second question I had was with regards to, oh shit, I'm drawing a blank. Sorry about that. It was on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, the sort of the sustainability measures like the PV panels and everything you're incorporating there. Was that a client request, or is that part of a greater sort of sustainability program, or what's going on there?
Yeah, it's actually a combination of all of that. It's I think it's a client who has an agenda to do good things, and if they can have an opportunity to use renewable resources, they want to explore that, and this is the building that they would do that on. They're certainly a client that has been committed to carbon and being carbon neutral if they can, sequestering carbon where possible. We've explored mass timber for this project because it seems to be a good scale, for that. But there could also be commitments and to use mass timber in future projects down the rest of the oceanfront site. And this building is a place to explore that material from a cost point of view, constructability, and even a pre-assembly point of view. You may be able to pre-assemble the wall panels and erect them very quickly as well. And certainly from the overall sustainable initiatives, our client was quite driven to do better, to go beyond the requirements. It's not just because he's sitting in the room.
Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. Julianne, I have you next on my list. Are you ready?
Thanks, John. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the presentation. First question, was there any consideration for integration of a First Nations narrative in the design process?
I'm glad you brought that up. I would say that the answer is yes. And I didn't point out that in the middle of the feature stair is a home pole. And my understanding, maybe Carlos could talk a little bit about the board makeup if people aren't aware of it.
Yeah, so a house post, Stefan, instead of home pole, a house post carving. And yeah, so our board is 50% Squamish Nation. So we are in partnership with Squamish Nation on this project. We have integrated various aspects kind of throughout our overall design, and so there'll be meaningful integrations across our site on the landscape side as well as within design.
Great, thanks. Just one more kind of practical question. The low carbon strategy, low or zero, I guess, does that extend into the landscape? Question for Joe.
I think our general approach is to be as carbon neutral as possible, or carbon plus if we can. Again, most of our planting is native in origin. In terms of stormwater management, I think we want to shed water to the park edge. We have the ability to integrate all of our stormwater and rainwater management with the park landscape architects. So from those two perspectives, I think two of the most prominent ways to providing impact, we have a lot of ability to do that.
How about kind of things like paving, materiality, and that sort of stuff?
Sorry, paving, we've explored a number of materials, but in conversation with the district, there's an interest in using a cast in place concrete just from a maintenance and operations perspective. But that doesn't preclude us from being able to capture that water and divert it to our planted areas on the street side, for example, and using them as infiltration areas, using slot drains, which we're working through the details of, to capture water and divert them to places for either for infiltration, but also for subsurface stormwater containment for the benefit of planting. So while it's not directly permeable, we're interested in using rainwater and capturing it for reuse.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Julian. I have Catherine next on my list. you're ready.
Hi there. Thanks so much for the presentation. I have a couple questions. One of them is the yellow cedar. You talked about it as a renewable resource. Where's the cedar acquired from? Is it a first growth, like a virgin forest, or are they planting yellow cedar now as a species that they're harvesting as second growth?
Yeah, no, I think the first part of our response really is that it's a BC wood. And when the forests are cut, they take down all the trees in a specific grove, and within those trees are trees that get used for regular lumber and other trees like yellow cedar that are harvested at the same time. It's those trees that get set aside at works yards for things like yellow cedar, shade cladding or siding or fencing.
Okay, so essentially these are you're harvesting virgin wood through clear cutting.
I don't know. Well, I would say yes, but I don't think I would say that that it's old growth. I don't know that.
Okay, well that'd be.
I think that's a great question. I think I'd like to follow up on that myself.
It's just an interesting question because people often bring up wood as a renewable resource, but clear cutting is definitely hard on habitat and all kinds of erosion issues. So
yes,
yeah, it can be a little misleading. And then and cedars tend to grow slower and in areas that are pretty sensitive. Can you tell me how long the cedar shingles, the yellow cedar shingles, what the length of life that they are before they need to be replaced?
I have seen installations of cedar siding that has gone from between 25 and 50 years. There are canneries that have used shake, and it's been there over 100 years. Now, the shakes that are closest to horizontal surface, like decking or concrete, some of those are in bad shape, but they can be pulled out and replaced. There's no need to take an entire wall apart. They can pull out individual pieces.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. And then I also had another question around, and again, this may not be readily available, but just in terms of the carbon footprint, is it possible that you can use concrete that's had carbon CO2 sequestered into it? There's kind of new technology that's emerging right now, especially for parking.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual amount of carbon, I would again have to go and check for exact numbers, but there's still Portland cement in concrete, and that has lime, and all of that is mined. And it goes back to your first comment that is I respect completely, is that we're taking wood out of a forest, but we're sequestering that carbon and replanting trees to capture more carbon. And that's again Squamish has grown from the logging industry. So there's a certain story that really supports the Squamish industry versus low carbon concrete.
I'll just maybe add to that. Right now, it's a supply issue because there's one company that has they basically have a tool that you can add to local concrete suppliers. The great news is Carbon Engineering, who's on our site, produces that pure CO2 that could be used in that process. The not so great news is we have a monopoly provider on concrete, and so it's up to them when they integrate that. So that conversation has started, and I know we want to see it, but that's our, we're not producing the concrete, unfortunately. But
yeah, no, fair enough. Thanks for clarification. I was just curious about that, and I wasn't aware that there's a monopoly, but I know I've seen the company around. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I think that's the extent of my questions. Thanks again.
How about a batch plant, Carlos?
do you know the concrete? I won't answer that though.
I love batch plants, believe me. I have Amy next on our list here for questions.
Hi. Very cool. Really excited about that.
Okay, Amy, we're having a bit of a problem with your audio right now. Your picture is frozen as well.
Okay.
It's
Very
not
choppy.
streaming in.
Amy, you may want to try turning your video off when you talk. That might help.
Almost sounds like a microphone.
So Amy, it looks like we're having technical difficulties here.
Oh. How about we come back to you, Amy, at the end and see if it's improved at that point? Because they're not picking up much at all. Okay, I'm going to move to Sarah next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I want to ask some questions about. So specifically, I want to ask about. Can everybody mute themselves because I'm getting back? Is where overheight accessible parking will be once the lot behind the building is built out and the remaining parking is going to be spread throughout other underground parking structures.
I would expect that the parkades would have overheight, well, what would be required by code as overheight handicap accessible stalls.
Yeah, I'll jump in there too, Sarah. So there's the issues that downtown Squamish currently faces for parking, we will not have. The village street network itself has about a 6.6 meter on-street parking stalls, parallel parking stalls throughout the development. So where possible, that's where we will likely see overheight parking situated.
Right. So you just need to be cognizant that you can't have grass between the street and the sidewalk then if you have a side lift to deploy.
Yeah, and all around the village, we actually have quite a hardscape treatment. So there will not be any grass. We'll be doing silvacells for our landscaping and hardscape on top of it. Yes.
That answers that. Okay, and then can somebody speak to what the surfacing is as the benches that go into the sort of marshlands that then look like they connect to a paved pathway that will go around the peninsula?
It's hey Sarah, it's we're working with Peter on the integration of those pathways that connect down from the patio to the park, and I think we want to make sure that they're accessible. So I think the intention is to have it as acceptable to accessibility standards. What that actually is, I think it could be asphalt, it could be concrete, but and of course we also want to make sure that they're sloped, no greater than 1 in 20, and avoid the need for ramps.
Okay, and then this is, I mean, it's an interior question, but you know, I like the precedent images that are shown, but there's absolutely no contrast between the floor and the walls, or the walls and the stairs, or the stairs and the handrail. So have you guys considered some contrast for people with visual impairments?
That's a very, very good point. And at the moment, the only contrast is the floor, which is the polished concrete versus all of the vertical wood. So that's a very good point. We'll take that.
But they're, yeah, totally. I mean, they're fairly close. So
yes.
Sarah, I can tell you that when the marketing group gets their hands on it, there'll be a poster or a advertising screen every square inch of that place, unfortunately, on the interior. So.
Oh.
Yeah, but it doesn't change the fact that have low vision and you're not going to be able to distinguish potentially between floor and wall, for instance. Okay, that's all my questions. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sarah. David is next.
Hi. Yeah. Do you have any renders of the building with the gray? Because
no.
Okay.
But we could. it's the aging will occur as it occurs. So.
Yeah. Okay. Is the exterior fire treated? I mean, how are you dealing? Is this a combustible building? Is it allowed to be? Are there any
Yes.
other precautions taken?
It's allowed to be a combustible building. It's allowed to be clad in combustible cladding.
Okay. Were you going to add any permanent patio cover to the upper patio, or shading and rain cover from that awesome upper deck?
We hadn't considered permanent, but the tenant might consider retractable canopies if there was a way to hold them down from the wind.
I had about 12 questions and everyone else has asked them. So they stole all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Christina, are you ready?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, that's the beauty of being near the end. I have a whole page of questions, and most of them have been answered, which is good. I'm just curious, and maybe this is just more curiosity on my part, but you're talking a lot about the park and the plaza, and I'm just wondering what the program is for that, and whether the intention of this area is, the culmination of kind of the commercial space, or is this, the end of the road, or I'm just wondering what's meant to happen in that plaza.
Joe?
Sure. And Carlos, feel free to jump in. And good to see you, Christina. Yeah, no, I think the intention when we first engaged with the team here was to really look at the plaza as a terminus to the long view down Cleveland, but not to obstruct the view, but to kind of create a kind of a curiosity or anticipation of that big broader view when you arrive there. So really it is meant to be a bit of a forecourt to the larger park. And the other thing I would say is the grading, as Carlos mentioned, everything's being brought up at 5.1 meter elevation allows us to step down to the lower park pathway. So you create this overlook on the site that I think you wouldn't get until you actually get into the plaza. So I think we're really intrigued by that. And in terms of program, it's very close to the play area that Anchor's developing. So we see a lot of integration with play and yet some separation from the street. We're being encouraged to look at some fire pits as well, fireplaces, outdoor fireplaces that kind of create some social opportunities on the other side of the plaza. And then the plaza itself being multi-purpose, used for a variety of events and activities that could spill out from across the street, etc. So being as flexible as possible within that space.
Yeah, because it's a bit hard to tell depending on who ends up in that building after the sales, right? That's
right.
I
think that's probably part of the consideration is what the future sort of change in tenancy might result in.
Yeah. Okay. I see that you had some windmills in one of the images. Is this the only location that you're considering doing something like that?
On the building itself, or over on the
or just in the whole site out on the spit? Would that be the primary location where you would look at doing something like that?
Carlos might want to answer that.
There was a wind study done back in the SODC days, and what it found was that being near an estuary, bit of an issue for wind power on that side, but also that the sound had something they called dirty wind. So it was gusty. It was only for a short period of time. So that's the whole concept. It's overall on this building. It's us testing concepts, right? We know we want to use mass timber. This is our ability to put a building together that's relatively low risk in mass timber. We know we want solar and we want wind power. Let's test it out here. So it's an unknown. If it works really well, then and we can integrate it and it all makes sense, then we'll continue that treatment as as the opportunity arises. But we just don't really know yet.
Yeah, that's why I was curious as to how you would determine that and whether this would be the only location or. I mean, given also that I'm assuming you're going to have to build your road. Are you going to build out the road to its, final iteration in order to be able to do this? No.
No, so the oceanfront road will have a bit of a rural interim cross section that'll have 2 travel lanes and a large 3-meter multi-use path and a shoulder on either side. That's what it will look like until each adjacent development comes online. That's when it gets the street lighting and the street trees and the curb and gutter and all the rest of it. So it would just, otherwise we would be building it to tear it down as those other features come online. So yeah, like I said, as a development, we'll have a signing strategy, a hoarding strategy to kind of make it feel more like a complete place, so that when people arrive on site, there's something holding their hand from the Vancouver Street intersection right now to the end of the oceanfront park. Yeah. We all know it's there, but I can tell you there's a lot more people that don't know it's there. So yeah. it's navigating that. That'll be one of the many tricks of.
Well, that's it. I think Carlos mentioned. I mean, I can't remember who it was that mentioned it, but just it's hard to envision that now because there's really nothing there, and getting out there, and then also security concerns. I would think might be part of the issue with it being alone out there. So, I mean, you're obviously not going to put streetlights all the way along. It's only going to be open during certain times of the day. So, I don't know if that's a consideration right now for the construction.
Absolutely. So we have security on site presently. That'll only increase when we're under construction on a lot of those buildings. But the fortunate part is that when this building opens up, we will hopefully have 2 to 3 to 4 buildings under construction at the same time. So there's, at least during the day, there'll be people there. And then the timing of it is, our intent is that shortly after we've got residential buildings being occupied. So this might not actually be the sales center for our first 1 or 2 buildings. We'll maybe sell those off-site and then have this there for the remainder of the development, just so we can kind of align all that timing. And ultimately, we want to create a sense of place and sense of vibrancy down in that, around that park, so that it feels like the real thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. And the only other thing was there any consideration of adding any green roof to this presentation center? Because it looks like there's a lot of flat roof.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I guess we did think about it, but I think it was quickly discounted as soon as we wanted to cover half of it in PV.
Yeah.
And it's also a very windy site.
Very windy, yeah.
And also,
interesting.
I like the look of a green roof. I like the impact that it can have. But in terms of its most significant influence of heat island effect, we're surrounded by ocean, so the heat island effect of that roof is next to nil. So better to have a durable roof.
Yeah, that only came into my mind when I saw how built out the site will be ultimately. So, yeah. Anyway, those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Shall we go back to Amy and have another try?
Hello. Can we hear me?
Yes, that's better.
Thanks. What a cool presentation. I loved the when you described it as a warm hug and a beacon. It's like a lighthouse on the water, which is really cool. A lighthouse is, it's a warning sign, but it's a welcoming place marker. Couple of things. Speaking of welcoming, I love that there's going to be some Squamish Nation welcome figure considerations here. But I was also thinking, as you're talking about making the space really vibrant and exciting and inviting, is there more consideration for additional public art?
I can get this one, Stefan.
Yeah.
So we have what's called a phase development agreement that's attached to the Squamish Oceanfront site. There are contributions of public art as we build out each lot. This lot will have a contribution of public art to at the time of occupancy. The park also has a large public art piece that will be to be planned. It's in the planning process. We've kind of got the spot that we want to put it at the Land's End, but it's not determined yet. So all things that we're considering, but very good point.
Awesome. And I love that you're thinking about this as a potential art space, because, I'm Squamish Arts Council here. We're always looking for amazing new places to show art. And I mean, with windows like that, gosh, it's going to be beautifully lit inside.
Yes.
A couple of other things. The water, and just knowing that area well, it's kind of at the mercy of the inevitable and incessant Squamish rain and wind. And so I was just thinking about that flat metal roof. You know, just like the sound of the rain. I mean, I love the sound of the rain, but is that going to echo? Is that going to be really loud? But also, if there's going to be buildings above it, is there a reflection that might be an issue as well?
So the roof, the main shed is significantly sloped, so it is draining water to gutter systems. I would say that within the first period of time, that when the brand new galvanized metal roof is put up, you can see it does have a shimmer to it right at the beginning. But as it ages, it galvanizes itself and it becomes a more flat gray. So it would reflect significantly less. But, you know, it'd be interesting because you're up on the chief and you'd see that beacon reflect the sun. So it's good and bad, I think. I think it'd be interesting.
I think it'd be beautiful unless, you know, right at the beginning, if you were above it and it's shining right in your eye.
Yes, true.
Yes, the base jumpers are just going to have to be cautious as they plot their landing point. Yeah, the other thing is just the wind, you know, trying to enjoy the space in the park, especially if you've got food and then suddenly the wind, that dirty gusty wind picks up and all your stuff's flying around. I know you're trying to mitigate that with landscaping and whatnot, but it like, is it enough? Just out of curiosity, because it is, when it's windy, it's really windy.
Well, is it enough? I mean, we've done what we can. I mean, there's the landscape berm, the stepping benches, but also a glass shield between this outdoor seating of the restaurant and the park itself. It's not going to be 20 feet tall because I don't think people want to be behind a big glass wall. But if it got uncomfortable, I think there's lots of indoor space to move into.
Awesome. Thanks very much. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I have no questions at this point. They've all been asked, and a great set of questions. Anyone have any last remaining questions?
I just have one question. Forgot to ask. Just out of curiosity, how much energy, or what would be the equivalent that the wind turbines would produce on the roof, in terms of what we get for however many there are?
Sure. We have some of those numbers here. At the moment, the photovoltaic array would produce 85 kilowatts per day, or 31,300 kilowatts per year. The wind turbines that we're looking at right now, if they work out, there's 5 2-kilowatt wind turbines.
So 10 kilowatts a day?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I'm just taking notes on that. I'm curious about that one too.
I have just one more question as well.
Okay, wonderful, Sarah. Go ahead.
Has there been any consideration about the acoustics in this space?
We haven't done an acoustic study per se. We have worked on a number of mass timber projects with large double height spaces, and wood is quite a good acoustic insulator, and quite a good acoustic dampener. But that being said, I think there are specific spaces that might need additional dampening. For example, in an office, if the ceiling's too high, it could become uncomfortable. But in terms of the overall double height space, certainly the marketing people will be putting in materials and perhaps banners or something that will help reduce any kind of reverberation or echo in the space.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks very much. I guess we will go back to David to start comments.
Thank you. I think it's an incredible landmark building, ultra high performance and sustainable use of CLT. Love that. Having those potential uses of a brewery or a art gallery so close to that park is making me think just build it now and get her done. I think the project's going to be that amazing silver and will actually blend in and almost relate more to the chief. which there's the images that you used. There was a rendering where the chief's behind, and you've got this beautiful fresh cedar building in front of it, when actually it's going to be this weathered silver. So you know, you had those great renderings in the snow. So maybe you can just do a Photoshop filter and put gray on it. Then we would have all had a kind of more realistic look of what it's going to be like for the next 100 years. I support the use of this cedar and its ability to age and carbon sequester. But Catherine brought an absolutely amazing comment up, which was, I'm aware of there's actually some companies in the Lower Mainland that are being blockaded at the moment from cutting down 500-year-old old growths on Vancouver Island. That's not sustainable, and it would be a shame to have all of this other high performance and sustainability and then clad the building in old growth cedar. So just really look into who you're buying that for. I'm glad Catherine brought it up. Yeah, it's an awesome project. Look forward to seeing it built. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Christina.
Thanks. I agree. I think it's a really exciting project, and I look forward to it being built. I think I appreciate the approach to the architecture with the concept of the beacon and the cedar. I agree that we should check and make sure where the cedar's coming from, but I think that that's a really appropriate treatment for a building in this location. I think the landscaping approach is simple and elegant, and I love how it speaks to the logging industry, and the use of the materials is consistent throughout. I think, you know, it'll be really subtle, but also just really beautiful. And I think I can absolutely envision it as an art gallery kind of space. I think, you know, the way that it speaks to the context of the other buildings that we can see in the drawings so far, I think, you know, it all seems to integrate nicely, and I can't wait to see it. Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. Sarah will be next.
Okay, yeah, I reiterate what I think the project is. It's a very handsome looking project, and it'll be great to see it built. I just have some concerns about, as I mentioned earlier, about ensuring that you've got appropriate contrast, floors and walls and floors and tabletops, stairs. That stairs have tactile warning indicator. You've got some contrast with your handle. Additionally, in image on page 3, there's an overhead protrusion from the stairs. So you'll need to have something that's cane detectable below that, otherwise somebody's going to. So, you know, that could be seating beneath it or any of those types of things. Additionally, make sure that you've got some sort of etching or something along the doors and any of the walls that somebody could into. I would encourage you to do an acoustic study to make sure that it's not going to be too noisy in there. Power assist doors would be great. And then additionally, with the seating that's outside that are these 12 by 12s, is that I would encourage you with the stacked ones to also have, you know, occasionally have some that will have some armrests so that somebody would be able to push up off the armrest should they need to get up. And that there's space allowance between those benches that somebody could use the chair or crutches or seeing eye dog. So you can look at the CSA 651 standards, and they'll all be there. Otherwise, I think the project, and I look forward to it being developed.
Thanks, Sarah. Amy, are you ready to go?
Yeah, no additional comments or questions. Looks great. Can't wait to grab a beer and hang out at the park.
All right, sounds good. How about Catherine? Your mic looks to be on mute, Catherine.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I like the project. I think it's wonderful. I would hope that you would. I'm not sure if you can actually acquire yellow cedar from supply that isn't virgin's forest. So if that supply is available, I'm pretty sure second growth is not. They don't plant cedar, so I don't know if there's a way that it can be acquired through selective logging practices, but yeah, a tree farm is not a forest, so the more we cut down virgin forests, the more we lose biodiversity and habitat. So those are my comments. Thanks. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, by the way. I love the project and I love what you've done. I just think it's something to really take a look at.
Thanks, Catherine. Julian will be next.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to reiterate a lot of what other people are saying. I think, you guys obviously know what you're doing, and I think the project's in safe hands. I'm just going to read some of my notes that I was kind of thinking about when you were describing things, just as things to think about, really. Embodied energy in materiality. So by that, I mean an analysis of what energy has gone into a material to make it. So for instance, hot laid materials for paving. So try and avoid the use of hot laid materials, if at all possible. Concrete, we talked about already. But in general, I think, you've obviously got an eye on your resilience strategy, all good stuff happening. One thing I would say about the green roof aspect of it, if it is at all possible, I know obviously there are cost implications to these things, but they do increase biodiversity. It is possible in windy areas. It does actually increase the longevity of your waterproof membrane because it's acting as a protection. So they're all good things. It's not just about stormwater retention. They do a lot of other stuff that's good too. I think I'm going to leave it there. I think it's a great project. I'm like everybody else. I'm looking forward to seeing it build.
Great, thanks, Julian. Kareem?
Yes, I'm gonna have to be sort of disagree with everyone here. While I do, would love to grab a beer there and see it built, I can't shake off the feeling that it looks quite institutional, to be honest with you. I appreciate your passion and talking about the cedar shake and so on, and your overall concept. But when I look at the images and I don't know if it's a combination of the openings along with the wind turbines, along with the PV panels, it looks like it could be a marine sciences center. It looks like it could be and it would be, I wish when I asked what the afterthought for this project is, I wish that was going to be it, because I would be totally on board. If it was going to be some sort of educational, institutional, something scientific that has to do with the water or the ocean or the mountains, it would be perfect. Unfortunately, I do not get this welcoming, whether as a sales center a little bit, but as a brewery, I don't know. I understand it's in fashion now to make breweries that look like they're 100 years old, but in my personal opinion, it's I feel that more can be done in terms of materials palette, in terms of openings, the proportions of glazing. I guess I'll leave it at that, but thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Brent is next.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, guys, for the presentation. I really like the building, and I wanted to say I think like having the variance for the additional height is something that I support. And I think creating a landmark and something that's visible from existing downtown Squamish, hopefully, and sort of acts as that beacon to bring people out to not only see the sales center, but to access the park and sort of really take advantage of what's going to be great public space, I think is really important and critical. I think the one thing for me, I look at these renderings and see it in the future condition that's going to be important is that as it's getting built now and maybe in the short term won't see super high pedestrian and cyclist volumes. I think it's important to think about what that's going to look like ultimately once the community is built out and ensure enough bike racks and places for people to sit, and that those aren't kind of afterthoughts that are thrown in afterwards once you see that demand, that's something that is considered right now, because you're sort of speaking to all of the key components to build a sort of vibrant, walkable, friendly community, but it's hard to do when it's currently sitting out in the middle of a preload site. So just sort of thinking about how you balance that and whether it's phasing or something else, but making sure that's integrated into the plans now and not something that's tacked on afterwards. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. I got to start by saying this building has really grown on me, actually, as I look at it more and more, and I totally get what you guys are doing. I think in the beginning I sort of wanted to see if you were going to do a marquee building out there, if there was going to be some kind of spire or an actual lighthouse or something like that. But then I realized that you're preserving your viewscape, obviously down low in front, and perhaps on some of the other sites you might do something that's going to be a marquee of some sort. So we don't know what's happening around it. So one of my suggestions might be just a little more context on the surrounding sites for us when we're looking at the buildings as individuals, and functionally, as well as potentially what could be happening next door as far as visually and how it connects and that sort of thing. The only functional thing that it's a question and a comment, but it looks to me as though the drop-off space out on the loading side of the building is a little bit tight. So, but once again, I don't know what's happening on the other side of the building to each end. Maybe there's more space there for more. So if you had a big event, hopefully it's an art opening of some sort, something like that, in the building in future. What happens if a whole bunch of cars come and maybe they're driverless, who knows, but I'm just curious about the functionality of that space on that side of the building and how it might be improved. So it's just a question maybe, or a recommendation is something to consider. But all in all, I got to say the cedar shake makes it for me as well. I love the idea that it's going to age in place. It's going to start to give the site a little bit history more quickly, or at least a more historical look. And it actually is what makes it a marquee spot in my mind, is that shake. And then functionally, the building is bang on. I mean, that's my background, is commercial function, and I really like what you've done. So does anyone else have any other comments?
John, I had one other thing. I just also wanted to, I forgot to mention this, that really excited to see mass timber building. It's something that I think, my time on the ADP, yet to see one. And I think that it really is, in my opinion, the way sort of certain scales of construction should be moving. And so I think excited to see that as something that is being explored at Oceanfront, and hopefully is going to continue through the rest of the stages of the build up of the project. So thanks.
Anyone else?
Just one thing from me, John. It's one of the things I underlined and then forgot to mention. It's just a question, really. Covered outdoor space, question mark. That's it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, so we do have actually recommendations here. Obviously, we're not looking at bringing it back, but I'm going to read the recommendations as they've been put to us on the report. And recommendation A is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented. Recommendation B is that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. And C, that the advisory design panel does not support the project as presented for the following reasons. I'll open the floor to suggestions on which recommendation. Do we have any, if we went with B and would say, let's put a couple recommendations out there that might be followed up on staff, would there be some specifically that any of you would bring up?
I don't think we had any specific recommendations.
I would say sourcing sustainable timber.
Actually, that one, yeah.
That would be one that I would put on the table.
That's a good one.
I don't know if that's within the within the program of what we look at here with the ADP, but it's definitely.
Really? Tell me why.
Well, you have to read through the report and see how the planning asks us for the departmental context and as far as site plan, architectural design.
They asked about the cedar shakes.
Not where it comes from.
Materiality.
Not where it comes from,
Yeah.
but the appropriateness of it.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm just saying it's a whole other discussion, and believe me, I'm involved in second growth cedar harvesting. So
you are. Okay, great.
Yeah, so
Great.
it's a whole other conversation, and I support it. I don't support old growth, but anyway, that's just a personal opinion, and I think that we've heard yours, and I totally respect it. But as far as a recommendation in the purview of the ADP, I would just ask if there was anything specific that we wanted to.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for
suggest.
clarifying.
Well, I had those accessibility considerations for them to look over in terms of contrast and doors and seating.
Yeah. And I would double up on that and say that my comment about the drop-off zone could be part of look at the functionality of accessibility on the front door.
Yeah, sorry, John, and just to clarify, if I could,
Sure.
that question. So there is kind of a formal loading zone, a loading bay on the side of the building, and that's more for the brewery function and for ideally it'll be shared with the hotel so that we can have one kind of larger garbage facility that's managed there. As far as pickup and drop off, it's a bit inside, but we are going through an amendment right now with the district where we will have kind of in perpetuity those 5 parking spaces secured adjacent to the building for kind of the life, ideally the life of the development, because there is talk of turning the remainder of the village streets into a proper Wooner style where it's there isn't parking, there's vehicle traffic is critical through there, but where vehicle parking maybe is removed and that space is given back to the pedestrians. So if that comes to pass, I agree with you very much that drop off and commercial access will be critical.
But also if you go to that model, then that would be losing some of the street parking that you're justifying your parking variance for, right? So how do you make up those parking spots if you lose the street parking?
That's great. So our preference is that we don't lose the street parking, Sarah.
Okay, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult in looking at a single building on the site as a solo, because we know many of these issues are going to be solved as a part of the wider development down there. So I guess we can only make that assumption that the as far as I've read on your report, you're covering your parking requirements, and after the on-site or the ground level parking is redeveloped, you'll have it underground. So anyway, does everyone just want to go for A and then forego the recommendations, or do we want to go for B and then pull up Sarah's recommendations?
Yeah, I think the accessibility piece, B, I'm good with B as well.
Okay. Yeah, so Brent, will you move for B?
Yeah, I'll move for B.
Okay, and then second?
I'll second.
Sarah? Okay, and then will anyone against? I don't see anyone against, so we move forward with B. And thank you very much, Carlos and team.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for your comments. That was wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
Can we just have, as a panel, just have a quick conversation about, I don't know whether or not it's the web, how the WebEx works versus Zoom, but it's challenging to look at the report. You can't look at the report and simultaneously pull up the drawings. So that's a problem. So either the report needs to be written differently, that there's the hyperlink is so we can have the open and have the drawings open simultaneously, because otherwise you have to print one off in order to see what not being met the guideline.
Yeah, I really missed that from our in-person meetings, and I'm actually running 2 computer screens here just to keep up with what you're talking about. And yeah.
Yeah, same. I've got 3 going to keep up with.
Oh wow, look at you.
Is the issue that when there is no presentation, or is the issue even when the presentation is on, the panel members have to have digital access to the drawings?
I think we need to have digital access to the drawing.
Yeah.
While the presentation is going on, because I jump back in between, and then I'm trying to look at the recommendations of what's not met the guideline, and I have to go out of the drawings. So then there's a load up time, which just makes it not very.
Yeah, I think the only way to resolve that is multiple screens, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Can't have it to move up in different tabs. Or have in the agenda, instead of have a link to the report and then have a separate link to the drawings.
I think
yeah, we
that's
could
how
do
it
that,
functions for me.
having a link to the drawings in the agenda.
Yeah.
That might remedy it.
Okay, we can
try it.
We'll try that.
That's all I had to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we motion to terminate? No other discussion. Okay, well, thank you to everyone. I'll ask for someone to move to terminate.
I'll make it.
Sarah, and Brent will second. Anyone against? No one against. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
All right.